Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. The story begins as the first intergalactic kaiju invades Earth. Unfortunately, this was only the beginning, as a relentless stream of kaiju soon showed up to wipe out humanity. To counter this world-ending threat, humanity gathered their best personnel and technology from each nation and established the anti-kaiju defense force called Erde. This force did find some success, but the damage was still heavy, and the war dragged on with no end in sight. That is, until a young savior emerged. Our protagonist is named Tetsuo, and he watches as some of the other kids play. He's very shy, and he runs away when they ask him if he wants to join. One day, Tetsuo stumbles across a robot that is protesting against robot violence. He wants his rights as a robot to be recognized, and he's refusing to self-destruct. The lead researcher arrives, and the others tell him that they can't get into the lab. His name is Kojika, and the robot says that this guy is the main problem. Kojika wants him to charge into the kaiju and self-destruct. Kojika doesn't deny it, and he reminds the robot that it's just a prototype. They will use it as an autonomous bomb to get rid of kaiju. There will be no human casualties, so he calls it a great innovation. If they can mass produce more of these robots, it will be a game changer in their fight against the kaiju. The robot says that it just wants to live, and Tetsuo is clearly concerned. Just then, the city alarms begin to sound as the kaiju are attacking. The researchers run for their lives, but Tetsuo stays behind to speak with the robot. Kojika has stayed behind as well because he wants to test the robot he calls Snowman. Unfortunately, he's informed that his son has boarded Snowman and taken manual control. Back with Tetsuo, we see that he's inside the robot and reading the instruction manual. Snowman is losing his mind as he can't understand what's going on. He tells Tetsuo that he shouldn't be here because it's too dangerous. Nearby, Kojika explains that there's nothing to worry about because he only added the cockpit for training purposes. The snowman is impossible to control, and Tetsuo would have to be a genius to drive it. Unfortunately for them, Tetsuo is a genius, and he takes control of the robot. The snowman begs him to stop because there's a chance that he can explode. Tetsuo confidently tells him not to worry because he will make it so that he won't have to lose his life. The researchers are then stunned when Tetsuo takes the snowman into the air. Kojika can't understand what's happening, and he only now realizes that Tetsuo is a genius. Hours later, a news report says that something mind-blowing just happened. A robot still under development has slain a kaiju single-handedly. What makes this even more incredible is that the robot's pilot is only 9 years old. Kojika reveals to the world that it was his son, and the robot he used can also explode. People on social media are calling them saviors, and they all want to know if the duo will continue to take part in the battle. Kojika completely changes his stance from before, as he doesn't want to waste this opportunity. He says of course they will continue to fight, and he declares that the snowman isn't some kind of disposable bomb. Meanwhile, Tetsuo is having an absolute panic attack because everyone is staring at him. As time passes, Tetsuo continues to make a name for himself. His heroic acts have become more common, and we see that he has grown up. The snowman has received several upgrades, and the war is about to enter the final phase. Tetsuo has been dominating the kaiju, and everyone is sure that their savior will bring peace to humanity. 10 years later, we find Tetsuo on an intergalactic cruiser. He's reading a book on the 777 steps to making friends. Before he can read the first step, an announcement explains that there are 40 minutes until the final battle. Tetsuo is called and asked to board the snowman. On his way, some girls tell him that they're counting on their savior. Tetsuo says that he will do his best, and he goes to get ready. He launches himself into space, and he tells the snowman that he calls Yukio now to let him on board. Yukio is really disappointed because he can tell that Tetsuo once again ran away from human interaction. Tetsuo wishes that he would have remained calm when speaking to the girls, and he can't believe that he's such a loser. He still hasn't learned how to talk to people because he spent all his formative years fighting kaiju. Yukio tells him not to give up and to keep trying to make friends. Tetsuo says that he's okay because he has Yukio, but Yukio points out that he's been saying that for 10 years. Tetsuo explains that making friends isn't easy because you have to clear 777 hurdles first. This is according to the book called How Even a Kaiju Can Make Friends, so Tetsuo says that it's too late for him. Just then, Tetsuo's captain named Mist informs our hero about the situation. Their ship will soon arrive at the kaiju horde. Once they engage the target, Tetsuo will break away from the ship, and the ship will head for the center of the horde. They will fire their infinity laser that can unleash damage over a 1,000-kilometer radius. Doing so will obliterate the entire horde of kaiju. The main issue is how long it will take to reach the launch point, so that is where Tetsuo comes in. Yukio tells everyone not to worry because he and Tetsuo will go on a rampage. They will draw the enemy close and eliminate the swarm. Their meeting ends, and Tetsuo realizes that he messed up another human interaction. Instead of saying yes ma'am like a normal person, he simply said ahoy. Yukio isn't worried about that because he just wants to go home with a win. Their dream is about to come true, and they just need to accomplish this mission. Just then, their fun quickly comes to an end as several kaiju have appeared. The rest of the crew is horrified because there's so many of them. There's an endless sea of kaiju, and they're all huge. All crew members are told that it's time for the mission to begin. Tetsuo pauses for a moment and reminds himself that he wants to become someone of worth. Yukio calls out to him and says that the enemy has arrived. Tetsuo's demeanor completely changes, and he confidently declares that it's time to go. They are ready, so Tetsuo activates his 7-sword style. Their attack leaves everyone in amazement as they took out several kaiju with one strike. Mist reminds everyone that Tetsuo is their savior, and she is sure that they will win. They eventually arrive at the launch point, so Mist tells everyone that it's time to save their planet. They prepare to fire the infinity laser, and this forms a giant ball of energy in front of their ship. Mist orders for it to fire, but everyone is shocked when their attack simply disappears. Unfortunately, Mist is told that their laser system just crashed, and the infinity laser can't be fired. Mist doesn't even understand what that means because it never happened before. She calms down and declares that they have to switch to Plan B. They will hold out against the kaiju attack and recall Tetsuo and Yukio. Unfortunately, this doesn't happen as the ship begins to shut down. The entire attack system and barrier generators are non-responsive. Things take a very dark turn as the ship's defenses have been completely wiped out. Mist can only watch in terror as the kaiju comes crashing into the ship. The crew is dragged into outer space, and Mist screams as her life comes to an end. This all happens in a flash, and Tetsuo is stunned as the ship explodes. Yukio can't believe it either, and he wonders if this means that humanity has lost. Tetsuo tells Yukio to calm down so they can head back to the ship. If there's even one person left alive, they have to save them. Yukio is still worried, but Tetsuo declares that the mission isn't over yet. They will keep fighting, and they will defeat the rest of the kaiju together. Hours later, we see that Tetsuo is completely exhausted, and they have eliminated several kaiju. Unfortunately, there are just far too many, and a countless number of them still remain. Yukio has taken severe damage, and he's even missing an arm now. Yukio begins to lose hope as he realizes that there's just no way that they can win. Tetsuo has no choice but to agree with him, and he says that they gave it their best shot. The only thing they can do is reduce the kaiju to a manageable number for the surviving forces on Earth. They will achieve this by activating Yukio's self-destruct mechanism. Tetsuo hates this because he promised that Yukio would never have to do it. However, they have no other choice. They're both in agreement, so Tetsuo says that it's time for them to save Earth together. As the kaiju attack Yukio's body, he makes light of the situation. He jokes with Tetsuo by pointing out that in the end, he never managed to make a single friend. Tetsuo doesn't want to be mocked right now because he's looking for the self-destruct command. Furthermore, he doesn't care about his life ending without a human friend because he still has Yukio. Yukio wonders if he really doesn't have any regrets, and Tetsuo says that he isn't sure. He thinks back to several moments in his life and how he spent most of his time fighting kaiju. Somewhere along the way, it didn't hurt him anymore to see other people with friends. He stopped caring a while ago, so he tells Yukio that he's okay now. He then thanks Yukio for staying with a guy like him all this time. Yukio is grateful as well because Tetsuo saw him as more than just a simple bomb and gave him a name. Tetsuo notices that Yukio has gotten quiet all of a sudden, and he's shocked by what happens next. Yukio takes full control of himself and explains that he feels guilty about something. Tetsuo desperately tries to regain control because he knows what Yukio is about to do. Yukio explains that his crime was stealing from Tetsuo by forcing him to spend the last 10 years not living a normal life. Yukio blames himself for forcing Tetsuo to fight the kaiju with him and nothing else. Tetsuo desperately says that he's fine being with Yukio and he wouldn't choose to be with anyone else. He pleads for Yukio to give him the controls back, but it's too late. Yukio has activated the emergency escape pod for Tetsuo, and a countdown begins. Yukio declares that he could never let Tetsuo die because Tetsuo was the one that gave him life. The countdown ends, and Tetsuo is launched to safety in the escape pod. He screams out to Yukio, knowing that there's nothing he can do. Yukio reveals that his true dream is for Tetsuo to go back to Earth and finally live a happy life. He says that he wants him to make lots and lots of friends, and Tetsuo begins to cry. He tells Yukio not to worry, and he vows to make at least 100 friends. Yukio says that he's relieved, and these prove to be his final words. His self-destruction activates, and it wipes out the horde of Kaiju. A while later, the pod disables cold sleep as Tetsuo has arrived at his destination. His current location is the Tokai region in Japan. The screen Tetsuo is looking at reveals that he was in a cold sleep for 8 years. Tetsuo is horrified to learn this because it means that it's been 10 years since he left Earth. He is technically an adult even though he didn't age, and he wonders if he will be able to make friends like this. Tetsuo comes up with a plan, which is to shut himself inside his room in complete isolation. This way he can spend time collecting information about the new world before going out to make friends. Tetsuo leaves the pod, and he's shocked when a huge crowd begins to cheer for him. They call him their savior, and they all say that they want to be friends with him. Tetsuo couldn't be happier, and he tells Yukio that he kept his promise. This turns out to just be a daydream Tetsuo's having, and he hopes that this is how it goes. Unfortunately, Tetsuo is stunned when he sees what the world is really like. It's completely frozen over when it should be summer right now. The scene is absolutely horrific as we see that the entire planet is now covered in ice. Tetsuo is completely stunned to see that the world is in ruins. Yukio gave his life, but the world still ended up getting frozen over. Tetsuo finds some hope as he wonders if it's just this city that was affected. He rushes inside the pod, hoping that Japan and the rest of the world is okay. He checks the logs recorded by the escape pod, and Tetsuo is horrified. The entire planet is covered in ice, and he can't understand how this is possible. There have been no signs of life so far, so he can only wonder if civilization has gotten wiped out too. Tetsuo remembers that he made a promise to Yukio to make friends, but that will be impossible if there are no people. After 22 hours of being depressed, Tetsuo begins to get hungry. There should be some rations somewhere on this pod, so Tetsuo goes to look for them. Just then, Tetsuo hears Yukio's voice, but it's only recording. It's from Yukio's final moments when he revealed what his true dream was. In his final moments, Yukio wanted Tetsuo to return to Earth and live a normal and happy life. Most of all though, he wanted Tetsuo to make lots and lots of friends. Tetsuo finds his motivation to move forward, so he eats some rations and heads outside. He plans to keep his promise, so his goal is to make friends no matter what. Tetsuo says that the key to doing it is in the book he has read hundreds of times. It's the book called How Even a Kaiju Can Make Friends, and it's written by Professor Lonely Iwaki. Step 1 out of 777 is to leave the house and meet people. Tetsuo is ready to do just that, so he leaves the pod. The pod will act as his base, and he will search for survivors. There is snow everywhere, and no signs of life. Just then, Tetsuo is stunned as he encounters a strange man. He trips into the guy, only to find that he's not alive at all. As he puts the man to rest, Tetsuo thinks about how terrifying things are. That guy was frozen to death, and it was so bad that he snapped in two easily. Tetsuo notices that the guy had a vehicle, and he's delighted to see that it still works. He uses it to travel, and he notices that he can also control a shovel with a lever. It's an excavator, and Tetsuo determines that it's a perfect vehicle for exploring a world covered in snow. He then comes across a giant hole in the ground and realizes how scary it is. Tetsuo says that his goal should be to find a place where humans might still be living, and he realizes that the best place would be underground. He goes to check the hole because he is sure that there will be tons of people down there. The first step will be calling down to them so they can let him in. Unfortunately for Tetsuo, his crippling antisocialness doesn't allow him to do this. There's no way that he can shout to a group of unknown people. As he thinks about his failures, a giant beast appears behind him. Tetsuo runs for his life, and he can't believe that there are still kaiju around. Tetsuo wonders if he should stop and fight, but he doesn't have any weapons. His only hope is to get away from it, so he rushes down the hole. At the bottom, Tetsuo is shocked to see the earth that he once knew. This is his home, but it's completely frozen over. Tetsuo begins to lose hope, but he remembers his promise to Yukio. He picks himself back up, but the kaiju reappears. Tetsuo declares that this is only the beginning, so he can't lose his life now. He charges straight at the kaiju with the excavator, and he keeps it from eating him by using the shovel. As he fights the beast, Tetsuo analyzes the situation. The kaiju wants to devour him, and all Tetsuo has is this mini shovel. Luckily, the kaiju's attacks are linear, so Tetsuo is able to dodge them. The only problem is that he has no way of hitting back. The kaiju attacks again, and Tetsuo can only block it. He calms himself down and reminds himself that he just needs to do what he's always done. He must use everything at his disposal and engineer a way to win. The kaiju's attack is relentless, and Tetsuo's excavator is taking tons of damage. Tetsuo continues to fight, but his shovel ends up breaking. This works out for him because he plans to use the sharp edge as a weapon. Just then, Tetsuo thinks back to something his father would always tell him. His father would always say that what made Tetsuo important was his sheer ability to eliminate kaiju. Tetsuo charges at the beast and uses the broken shovel arm as a lance. The beast consumes him, but Tetsuo is able to pierce it with his improvised weapon. The kaiju's defeated, and we see other people for the very first time. They wonder what happened, and they can't believe that they just stumbled across an entire kaiju. As they celebrate, Tetsuo makes his exit from the kaiju's mouth. Tetsuo is shocked to see other people for the first time, and they're just as surprised to see him. He's delighted to have finally found some humans, but they are terrified because they think that he's some kind of monster. Tetsuo gets emotional as he tells Yukio that he found some survivors. Unfortunately, they're still terrified of him, and they tell the evil spirit to be gone. Their chief named Ao tells him to calm down because this guy is obviously human. Tetsuo remembers that he's on a mission, so he reminds himself about the next step to making friends. After making the encounter, Tetsuo is supposed to do something while smiling. He can't remember what it is, but there's no time to waste. Tetsuo smiles at them, but his hideous smile only makes things worse. The others are really terrified, and they call Tetsuo a creep. Unfortunately for our hero, he's exhausted, and he ends up passing out. Tetsuo then has a dream about a time when Yukio criticized him for reading another how-to book that has no objectivity. Tetsuo assured him that this one was different because it was written by someone named Lonely Iwaki. He said that the book had to be good because Lonely was a person with over 1 million friends. Tetsuo's only concern was that people wouldn't be interested in him when he's not with Yukio. As Tetsuo wakes up, he remembers that step 2 in the book is to identify himself. Tetsuo notices that he's in an ice cave, and he wonders where those people went. Just then he's shocked when he sees that there are a lot more people now. There are tons of them, and they're taking apart the kaiju. Tetsuo is determined to make them all his friends, but he realizes that he's tied up for some reason. Tetsuo isn't worried, as he knows how to free himself. He's dislocated his arms plenty of times piloting Yukio, so it's no big deal. Nearby, the people from earlier celebrate their find. Everyone is really elated about retrieving this kaiju, but Ao knows that she can't take the credit. The guy named Nashimura tells her not to worry because he will just leave out the part about who really find the kaiju in his report. He then points out that Ao is the ace, according to the elders. If they knew that she was sneaking out every night to explore the kaiju lair, they would lose their minds. Ao now tells him not to worry because she will continue doing whatever she wants. Nashimura was the one that found her as a child, so he gets emotional after seeing how much she has grown. Just then, the others rush over to tell Ao that the guy they tied up has escaped. Meanwhile, Tetsuo's busy watching the people take the kaiju apart. It doesn't take Tetsuo long to realize that this is how these people managed to survive. The world has frozen over, so they are using kaiju for resources. These people really are amazing, and Tetsuo wishes that Yukio was here to see them. Just then, Tetsuo sees that some little kid is playing with the Yukio toy. The kid just runs off though, as he calls Tetsuo a weirdo. Unfortunately for the little punk, a piece of ice is about to crush him. Tetsuo springs into action, but he quickly realizes that he won't make it in time. Luckily, he's able to find a pole, and he uses it to rescue the kid. The father rushes over and scolds the kid. He has told him tons of times not to play under icicles. Some other guys saw what happened, so they thank Tetsuo for rescuing the kid. Just then they realize that they have never seen Tetsuo before. They still kind of recognize him for some reason, so they ask him what section he's from. Tetsuo doesn't have a good answer for them, and his anxiety isn't helping. The guys start to get suspicious of him, but the other guy stops them from bothering Tetsuo. He is sure that Tetsuo has his reasons for not answering, and it doesn't change the fact that they owe him one. It doesn't matter who he is or where he's from. The guy introduces himself as Takamura and his son as Joji. Tetsuo struggles to shake his hand, but it's okay because Takamura takes his hand. Tetsuo introduces himself back and completes step 2 from his book. Takamura tells him to wait a moment because he wants to give him some prime cuts of kaiju as a thank you. Nearby we see that Ao and the others saw everything. Furumaki wonders if they should capture Tetsuo, but Ao rejects the idea. Their job is to deal with any threat to the mall, but Tetsuo doesn't fit that category. Tetsuo is still a mystery to them, but they can always get his story later. Ao says that it's time to get to work, and she happily walks over to the kaiju. Unfortunately, the ground begins to shake, and a giant arm appears out of nowhere. Everyone then watches in terror as a much larger kaiju arrives. Tetsuo can't believe his eyes because the bone structure of this kaiju is not like anything he has ever seen before. The kaijus that Tetsuo has seen before don't look anything like this one. Everyone screams in terror, and the giant beast crushes a group of people. This terrifying sight makes it really sink in just how dire their situation is. The monster is horrific, and Tetsuo wonders how he will defeat it. He doesn't have Yukio anymore, and there's no way he can fight it with his bare hands. Just then, Tetsuo realizes that he can just ask the locals how they deal with these kind of kaiju. Unfortunately, it becomes clear that they won't be of any help. They are frozen with terror, so Tetsuo determines that he will have to get them out of here. There are so many people here though, and Tetsuo doesn't have a good way to protect them. One guy tries to run for his life, but that won't work. Tetsuo tries to stop him, but it's too late as the kaiju already sees him. Luckily, Ao is able to rescue him just in time. The guy thanks her profusely, but she surprisingly bashes herself into the ground because she is furious. The kaiju just ate someone, and she can't stand the thought of someone losing their life on her watch. Furumaki tells her to save the brooding for later because they have work to do. They have set everything up, so Ao activates the emergency fog machines. The area is quickly covered in fog, so Ao tells everyone to run. The locals begin rushing to safety as they instruct each other to remember their drills. Tetsuo watches in amazement as it only took one word for everyone to run to the surface. Tetsuo is relieved because everyone will be okay, but he notices that the kaiju is preparing to do something. The beast has started to recoil, and Tetsuo can sense that things are about to get really bad. This instinct is due to his experience as a savior who has slain countless kaiju. This kaiju is about to pounce, and more people's lives are about to end unless he does something. Time is running out, but Tetsuo can only wonder what he's capable of without Yukio. Just then, Takamura tells Tetsuo to get to safety. Everyone is worried about him, and they encourage him to run with them. Tetsuo remembers how he felt as they were becoming friends, and he realizes what he must do. Instead of running away, Tetsuo doesn't hesitate to run in the opposite direction. He runs past the kaiju, hoping to draw its attention away from everyone else. Takamura begs him to stop, but Tetsuo has already achieved his goal. The kaiju's attention is purely on him, and Ao can't understand why Tetsuo would risk his life. The kaiju easily overpowers him, and Tetsuo gets knocked around with every attack. Takamura is so worried about him that he has to get held back. Ao refuses to leave Tetsuo behind, so she rushes in to go after him. It's a completely hopeless situation though, as Tetsuo can no longer move. Ao comes face to face with the beast, and we see that it has Tetsuo in its hand. Tetsuo has taken way too much damage, and his life is about to end. Just then, the device on Tetsuo's face begins to glow. Our hero's then shocked as the ceiling begins to crack and something crashes through. The giant chunk of metal strikes the kaiju, and Tetsuo can't believe it. A few minutes earlier, we see what happened. 42 hours have passed since the escape pod landed, and the system finally booted up after installing massive amounts of data. The escape pod immediately found Tetsuo and rushed right to him. As it approached, Tetsuo could hear Yukio calling out to him. It turns out that this is the insurance that Yukio had left behind, and it's the insurance that he never thought he would use. Tetsuo now watches in shock as the escape pod begins to transform. It's Yukio, and he says that it's time for the two of them to fight back. A look back to 14 years ago shows a time where the city was under attack. Tetsuo and Yukio arrived while Tetsuo's father calmly watched. They were ready to fight, but Yukio noticed that his joints were all creaky. Kojika had to apologize because he forgot to give Yukio a tune-up the night before. Tetsuo was ready to push past that, but he was shocked to find that his drink was replaced with oil. This was another mistake from Kojika, so he had to apologize again as their battle began. After winning the fight, the guys returned to the base to see that Kojika had ditched them again. It was always just the two of them, so Yukio was the first friend that Tetsuo had ever made. After Yukio's self-destruction, Tetsuo was left flying through space all alone for several days. As he thought about Yukio, he realized that he had a giant hole in his heart. It never closed up, and it never faded away. He could only pretend like it did, and he assumed that it would always be that way. That's why Tetsuo can't believe his eyes as he stares at Yukio in front of him. There's no time to chat though, because the kaiju begins to attack. Yukio acts immediately, and he lands a devastating blow. He declares that in the moment of the blast, he transferred himself into the pod. The installation took a really long time, which was why he could only reveal it now. Yukio gets emotional as he tells Tetsuo that he's finally home. Our hero can't hold back his tears as he welcomes back the only friend he's ever had. Everyone watches in complete shock, but they point out that the kaiju is still alive. Yukio can tell that the beast is pretty upset, but that doesn't matter. He declares that any kaiju that shows up in front of him and Tetsuo stands no chance of living. Yukio says that this holds true even if he has no decent weapons to speak of. Tetsuo can't believe it, so Yukio reminds him that this new body of his is nothing more than an escape pod. In terms of specs, it's lowlier than even a prototype. Tetsuo wonders what they're going to do, so Yukio says that everything will work out because they're a team again. Things are just like old times, as Tetsuo tells Yukio that he's way too optimistic. The locals continue to watch in disbelief because Tetsuo seems to be talking to the robot. They're getting a little too close though, so Ao has to remind them just how dangerous the kaiju is. The kaiju begins to curl up again, and Yukio recognizes its stance very well. The beast is bracing its front legs and neck in preparation to attack its prey. The kaiju launches its giant body at our heroes and causes massive destruction. Luckily they jumped out of the way, and the beast just crashed into a wall. Yukio has put Tetsuo in the pod, and he says that they wouldn't have stood a chance if that attack hit them. The kaiju recoils again, and Tetsuo determines that it can bombard them with attacks as much as it wants. It'll be too late if they attack after dodging, so they have to do something. The beast recoils even more this time, and even the locals can tell that it's doing something terrifying. They wonder if those guys will really be okay, and one person declares that they will be fine. Everyone asks how he can be sure, so he reminds them that they have seen this before. They are unsure about what he means, so everyone takes a closer look. The kaiju unleashes its attack again, so our heroes get ready to counter. As they prepare to battle, the locals remember this sight. The beast soars through the air again, but this time, our heroes strike it in the neck. This is their Robo one-sword style Diablo attack, and it completely chops the head off the beast. The locals are absolutely stunned, and Ao couldn't be more amazed. The giant kaiju is finally defeated, so everyone cheers in celebration. Ao's eyes widen as she admires our hero and the attack he just used. He slashed the kaiju while spinning and used that momentum to chop its head off. The kaiju was moving at blinding speed, but Tetsuo was somehow able to see it. Their celebration continues, but something ominous happens 100 kilometers away. This place is Tokyo, and there we see a totally different type of kaiju. This thing is a giant as well, but it looks much closer to a human than the others. After defeating the giant kaiju, Tetsuo and Yuki are escorted to the mall where the survivors live. Tetsuo can't believe that they're actually being taken there, and he's just glad that they managed to defeat the kaiju. As they travel, Yukio brings up how shocking it is that the entire planet has frozen over in just 10 years. Tetsuo agrees and says that he was absolutely stunned when he first landed on the Earth alone. He gets emotional again as he tells Yukio how glad he is that he's still alive. Yukio asks him to please stop bursting into tears every single time they talk because it makes conversation really difficult. Tetsuo apologizes, but Yukio gets emotional too. Seeing Tetsuo in tears every time gets to him as well, and he admits that he's also glad that they got to see each other again. One of the guys from the group says that they should be in good shape for a while with all of this kaiju meat. A girl says that the savior robot is really impressive, and she turns to Ao to see if she agrees. Ao doesn't respond because she's long gone. She has approached Tetsuo, and she hands him a can of pineapple. She explains that nowadays, they save these kinds of things for special celebrations. Yukio thanks her, but Tetsuo forgets how to use his words again. Yukio wonders how Ao even got up there, and Yukio reminds Tetsuo that he really needs to work on his communication skills. Ao explains that the can of pineapple is an ultra valuable item that can't be made anymore. Sweet things are incredibly rare in this world now, and pineapple is no exception. Ao can already smell the sweet scent coming from the can, and even she is amazed. Tetsuo stares at the can and wonders if it's really okay for him to have something so precious. Ao struggles between asking him to eat it and then immediately telling him not to. She quickly corrects herself and urges him to please eat it now while she is still in control. She explains that Tetsuo and Yukio saved all their lives, and she wants to return the favor with something just as precious. She then sincerely thanks them both for everything they did. Tetsuo determines that eating it would be the polite thing to do, so he digs in. Ao tells him to go ahead, and Tetsuo begins to eat the pineapple. He's completely overcome by how delicious it is, but Ao freaks out after just one bite. Tetsuo wonders if he did something wrong, but Ao explains that that's not it. It's just painful for her to see the absolute quantity of pineapples in this world decrease. After they finish the can, Tetsuo thanks Ao for the meal. Ao tells him that she didn't just come here to give him the pineapple. She also wanted to introduce herself and offer him some information. She formally introduces herself as Ao Nagi, and once again thanks Tetsuo for saving them. Tetsuo nervously introduces himself back and says that it's nice to meet her. Internally, Tetsuo is thrilled because he has now identified himself again. As part of her introduction, Ao says that her favorite food is expensive red bean jelly. Yukio can't believe that she went crazy over the pineapple and it wasn't even her favorite food. Ao tells him that there's something else she wants to share with him, and she says that she would like to tell him what happened 10 years ago. Tetsuo hesitates for a moment, but he tells her that he would love to hear about it. 10 years ago in Japan, a strange kaiju appeared from the sea. Seeing kaiju wasn't anything special because people were used to it, but there was something different about this one. This one was completely different from anything anyone had ever seen before, and there were 3 things that made it truly abnormal. For one, it had clearly taken on a human-like form. Secondly, it had appeared not from outer space like the others, but from the sea. On top of that, it was accompanied by a strange white floating sphere. The soldiers had no idea what it was, but they decided to just eliminate it. As they prepared to fight, the soldiers complained about how hot it was inside their mechs. That quickly changed, however, as the temperature inside the robots began to drop rapidly. The water began to freeze, and the spheres multiplied before the kaiju sent them away. In a short time, these white spheres appeared all across the globe. They continued their onslaught and kept multiplying as they spread across the entire world. Anytime they came into contact with something, the spheres would freeze everything in the area. A fierce absolute 0-degree wind swept in and snuffed out countless human lives with ease. Ever since that day, the planet has never warmed again, and it all started just a decade ago. Tetsuo and Yukio are horrified to hear this, and they wonder how all this happened right after they left. They can't believe that this was all done by just one kaiju, and they wonder how powerful it is. They want to know where the anti-kaiju defense force was, and Ao confirms that she knows who they are. Yukio says that they're all professionals when it came to anti-kaiju battles, so they couldn't have just stood by and done nothing. Ao explains that it was simply too sudden, and the Erde sustained catastrophic damage in the first freeze. The ones who survived did their best to protect the people, but it wasn't long before more kaiju started raining down from outer space again. Ao doesn't think that they were wiped out completely though, because there are all kinds of rumors. One of them is that there's a mall specifically for Erde survivors, but there's apparently a power struggle going on there. Tetsuo and Yukio say that some of them must still be alive, and Ao tells them that she hopes that they get to see the others again. A little later, Ao says that they're almost there, and she tells the guys to brace themselves. Furamaki tells Tetsuo not to disappoint Ao with his reaction, and Tetsuo is just thrilled to hear someone calling him by his name. They round a corner, and Ao announces that they have arrived at Mishima Mall. Tetsuo is amazed when he sees it, because it's built right inside a crack in the ice. Furamaki says that it was probably a junior high school before, and he hopes that it isn't a letdown. Tetsuo says absolutely not, because there's so many people here. Just then, everyone inside the mall notices that Ao has returned. People begin to wonder if this means that the savior has come back, or if the Erde has made a triumphant return. The crowd swells, and everyone is excited to see Tetsuo and Yukio. They welcome them home and congratulate them for making it back. Tetsuo can't believe his eyes because there's so many people celebrating them. They want Tetsuo to strike a pose, and they call him Herculean as he obliges. Ao then takes a moment to explain how life works in the mall. There are about 200 people living together, and everyone has a specific role. In a nutshell, there are people who go outside to gather cultural resources, and then there are people who stay inside and run the infrastructure that keeps the mall functioning. There's a materials department, a daily life department, a disassembly squad, an excavation department, a warehouse department, and a technology department. Tetsuo's deeply impressed, and he thinks everyone here is just amazing. He asks Ao what department she's the chief of, and she replies that it's the accounting department. Tetsuo is caught off guard by this answer because she was fighting before. Furamaki can tell that he's probably wondering why Ao was in the Kaiju lair in the first place. He explains that Ao is really not supposed to leave the mall at all, but she sneaks out every single time. Ao sees that some people are angrily waiting for them, so she says that it's time for them to go get yelled at again. Before leaving, she tells Tetsuo that Takemura has offered to look after him. Takemura says that he wants to show Tetsuo a very special place, and he takes him to a hot spring. Tetsuo is speechless, and he can't believe his eyes. He spent 10 years in outer space, and everything he has encountered since coming back to Earth has been freezing cold. Takemura smiles and tells him that he arranged for Tetsuo to have it all to himself. He quickly adds that he and his son will also be joining him. As the warm water relaxes him, Tetsuo notices something strange. He wonders why the mall is warm in the first place, because when he climbed down from Yukio, the mall was the only place that had no snow anywhere around it. Takemura notices that Tetsuo is deep in thought, and he tells him to just focus on the water for now. Takemura then reveals that a kaiju is buried underneath this mall. Tetsuo is shocked to hear this, but Takemura assures him that it's completely safe. He tells him to listen carefully because he's about to tell him the story of the kaiju tamer who saved them all. 11 months after the big freeze, the survivors were in desperate shape. They moved from place to place looking for shelter, but kaiju had taken over everywhere. By that point, they had run out of food completely and were starving. One day, someone found the carcass of a kaiju, and they were so desperate that everyone ate it. This ended up taking half of their lives because most people's bodies completely rejected the flesh of an extraterrestrial creature. The lucky ones, whose bodies didn't reject it, survived. The ones who chose not to eat it soon froze to death instead. It was a horrific situation, but the survivors had to keep pushing forward. During one of these desperate moments, Ao was struggling to keep up with the group. She barely had any energy, and she had to be carried. One of the men suggested that they just leave her behind because she was slowing them down. Ao's teacher refused to hear it, and he demanded to know how anyone could say something like that. The man pointed out that Ao had been sick ever since she ate the kaiju meat, and it was only a matter of time before she spat up blood and died like the others. Just then, a kaiju appeared, and everyone started running. Some of them froze in fear, but only because another kaiju was behind them. After getting away, they noticed that the two kaiju were locked in a stare-down. Ao's teacher just now realizes that in the chaos, he accidentally left her behind. Takemura was determined to go back for her, but everyone stopped him. They said it was pointless because she was already as good as dead. Takemura erupted and said that it was wrong to abandon the life of a child no matter what the circumstances were. He declared that as long as they were human beings, it was not okay to just give up on someone. The group reminded him that there was no savior anymore, but Takemura refused to give up. Meanwhile, Ao was completely alone and on the verge of death. She couldn't move, and for some reason her hair turned white. A mysterious voice began speaking to her inside her head, and it asked what she was thinking as she faced her own death. Ao realized that this voice had been speaking to her ever since she ate the kaiju meat, and she understood now that it was coming from the kaiju itself. The kaiju told her that she was going to die, and it found the emotions of humans fascinating. Ao could only think about how she didn't want her life to end. There was so much she hadn't experienced yet, like falling in love and competing in the Olympics. She wanted to eat some warm pancakes because she didn't want her last meal to be kaiju meat. Ao was scared of pain and losing her life, so she cried out. The voice really enjoyed hearing this because it's the emotions he envisioned. It told her that it expected her to feel fear, despair, regret, and most of all hatred towards the humans who abandoned her. Ao took a moment to think about everything and then calmly said that she was not feeling hatred at all. She told the kaiju that she was actually feeling a tremendous amount of love for the people around her. The kaiju was completely baffled by this and told her that it was incomprehensible. Ao went on to explain exactly who these people were to her. She described how Mr. and Mrs. Takamura always shared food with the kids, even when they didn't have enough for themselves. She talked about her teacher, who's a complete scaredy cat, but he always looked out for the children no matter what. That is just who they all are, and Ao told the kaiju that she loves every single one of them. Ao used her last bit of strength to stand up, and she declared that she wanted to protect them. She remembered hearing someone say that they don't have a savior anymore, so she said that they still had her. The kaiju roared in her face, but Ao didn't budge at all. She declared that she would tear it to shreds from the inside and announced that humans will win. The kaiju attacked her, but the other kaiju stopped it. The kaiju in her head said that everything she was saying was incomprehensible. It found the whole thing incredibly interesting, and it couldn't understand how such a tiny human child could talk about protecting everyone while staring down death. The kaiju that protected her gained some kind of new power, and even Ao was shocked when she was also covered in flames. Everyone watching was in disbelief as they realized that Ao somehow connected to the kaiju. The two of them were in sync, so everyone wondered if she was some kind of kaiju tamer. Nothing like this had ever happened before, so they started calling her their savior. The kaiju told Ao that it was interested in her thoughts and emotions. In exchange for more of this knowledge, it would use its newfound power to protect all of them. As long as she kept showing him these emotions, it promised to keep the land warm. Back to the present, Tetsuo shown the kaiju below the mall, and he can't believe his eyes. Elsewhere, a colonel watches the mysterious kaiju very closely. The kaiju casually sits atop a building, and the colonel is visibly upset. His subordinate named Otochi arrives and says that he's here to get the colonel. Otochi tells him that it's a frigid night and warns that if they get any closer to the kaiju, even cold weather clothing won't be much help. The colonel already knows this, which is why he says that they're going to need a heat source. Otochi can already tell that he's talking about the flaming kaiju that is kept at the Mishima Mall. Otochi wonders what's been happening with the humanoid variant kaiju, so the colonel explains that it hasn't moved an inch. Nobody can tell what it's seeking, but the colonel makes it clear that getting rid of it is an absolute must if they're going to save the world. Just then, the terrifying kaiju looks at them, and the colonel realizes that it's onto them. Unfortunately, it's too late, as the building they're on begins to collapse. A giant three-headed kaiju appears, and they determine that the humanoid kaiju even has its own bodyguards. The colonel tells Otochi that they have no choice but to fight. Otochi reminds everyone that they are the anti-kaiju defense force, and they are the light of Erde. He comes face to face with the kaiju, and declares that it's time to show the world what Erde can do. Back with Tetsuo, he's amazed to see that there really is a kaiju under the Mishima Mall. He can't help but notice that it looks like a giant bird, and it's covered in flames. Ao explains that when he connected with her and acquired thought, he was already in this bird form. However, when he first came to Earth, he was probably a normal kaiju. She then addresses it directly and calls it by its name, which is Land of Men. Land of Men tells her to stop chattering because he's taking a nap. Takamura then tells Tetsuo that they got lucky running into Ao after his bath. Without her here, they would have no idea what the kaiju was saying. Just then, the kaiju lets out a breath and it pushes a piece of cloth into the air. The cloth burns away immediately, which means that the air around them is incredibly hot. Ao explains that the only area that's temperature controlled is right around her, so everyone needs to stay close. Not too close though, because she's also capable of controlling flames, just like the kaiju. Ao points out that the only way that the human species can adapt to the bitter cold is to get closer to the kaiju. Ao doesn't want anyone to worry though, because she promises to protect them all. The guys are really impressed, but Ao says to forget all of that because this kaiju is a real weirdo. He can't move because it takes almost all his strength to worm them all, so he wants something in return. She wonders if Tetsuo can guess what it is, and she reveals that he wants books. Land of Men wants a book a day, and Ao's the one that reads to him. The kaiju actually named itself after one of the books it liked, and chose the name Land of Men. Ao calls it a weird bird, and the kaiju tells her to shut up. Afterwards, Takamura leads Tetsuo back to the room that will be his new home. Tetsuo is amazed, and Takamura explains that it's an old classroom with tin dividers. Fortunately, Takamura says that rooms are given to those with families, which means that Tetsuo is now officially a member of the Takamura family. Takamura introduces the other members, which are himself and his son Joji. He then says that his daughter should be here as well, but she doesn't seem to be around. Her name is Hagane, and just as Takamura says her name, Tetsuo opens a curtain. Behind the curtain is Hagane, who's getting dressed. Hagane screams that she's going to obliterate his memory after what he saw, but it's too late, as Tetsuo has already passed out. Hagane explains that Tetsuo saw her without clothes, but Yukio says that there's nothing to worry about. Yukio explains that Tetsuo's savior reflexes allowed him to short-circuit the visual information before it even reached his mind. Tetsuo wakes up, and Hagane greets him. Tetsuo introduces himself like nothing happened, and Hagane determines that he must have lost his memory. She tells him that her dad has already gone back to work, and he left Tetsuo in her care. She hands Tetsuo a letter from Takamura, and Tetsuo is absolutely thrilled because it's his very first letter. According to his book, exchanging letters is one of the 777 steps to making friends. Takamura's letter tells Tetsuo that he will be back that night and asks him to try to get along with Hagane. Hagane quietly thinks to herself, and she determines that since Tetsuo's in her care, that means she can use the savior any way she wants. Takamura also says in the letter that he wants Tetsuo to watch over Hagane. If Hagane tries to go to her mother's workshop, Tetsuo should try to stop her. Takamura explains that Hagane's on the frail side, and she only just lost her mother a month ago. Before Tetsuo can even process this, Hagane tells him to come along because she wants to take him somewhere. Tetsuo immediately fears that she wants to go to the workshop, but that's not it. Hagane reveals that she's going to give him a tour of the mall's attractions. Of course, she immediately brings him to her mother's workshop and declares that it's the best place in the entire mall. She explains that her mother was a higher up in the technology department, so she had her own research and development workshop. Hagane has been using it in secret ever since, and she speaks about her mother with obvious pride. Tetsuo asks if her mother was an amazing person, and Hagane pauses for a moment before simply saying yes. Hagane has a memory of her mother being impressed with the things that Hagane would build. Hagane was always building things and receiving her mother's praise, and it all happened in this workshop. Her mother would always pat her on the head whenever she did a good job. Hagane tells Tetsuo that she actually wanted to ask him for something. She wants his opinion as a savior on whether what she's currently building is effective or useful. Hagane shows him, and Tetsuo's in disbelief. Meanwhile, the Colonel and Atoichi discuss what just happened during their encounter with the Kaiju bodyguard. Atoichi says that they barely escaped, but the Colonel says that it was too early to fully engage anyway. They got what they needed, which was a Kaiju eyeball, and they also gained some valuable insight. To get closer to the humanoid variant, they will need to incorporate Mishima Mall's flaming Kaiju after all. Just then, Atoichi remembers that he received an intriguing report from someone named Artemis. The report says that Tetsuo the Savior has just returned from outer space. The Colonel is stunned because there were no signs of Erde or any other crew members, and Snowman has not been sighted either. Atoichi was told that Tetsuo has arrived at Mishima Mall with another robot. The Colonel didn't see this coming at all, and he calls Tetsuo his old comrade. It turns out that Tetsuo couldn't be finished off, even at the edge of outer space. The Colonel wonders what to do about this, but quickly decides that they won't be doing anything for now. He says that having the ignorant masses all in one place actually works in their favor. As for the flaming Kaiju and Tetsuo's new machine, they will be taking them both. The Colonel declares that Vierde perished once, then rose up from the ashes. They are the ones who will keep the light of their salvation burning. He announces that nothing will stop Vierde from saving the world. That night, Takamura returns home, and he's greeted by Hagane and Tetsuo. They are both exhausted, so he wonders why. Tetsuo says that they were having a back and forth discussion, but Hagane interrupts him before he can spill the beans. She simply says that she spent the day showing Tetsuo around the entire mall. Takamura moves on and says that it's time to start making dinner. They use a heated stone that was heated by the Kaiju bird. Before they eat, Takamura explains that it might be too risky, so Tetsuo shouldn't eat any Kaiju meat. Everyone enjoys the delicious meal, and they have a nice conversation. They then go to bed, but Tetsuo can't fall asleep. It turns out that eating with company and sleeping on the floor together are 2 more steps from his book. He has just cleared 2 more, and he thanks Professor Lonely Iwaki. He then thinks about how fun the entire day was. He will always look back on this day, and he hopes that Yukio will too. As they sleep, Hagane has a terrible nightmare as she remembers how her mother was consumed by a Kaiju. Nearby, we see that Artemis is actually a Kaiju. He's feasting on something tasty, and he says that he wants to devour humans. The Colonel's subordinate named Rico is able to communicate with Artemis, and she tells him to shut his mouth. She tries to remind him about his job, but Artemis tells her to shut up instead. All he cares about is eating, and he says that he wants more. Riko is furious because Artemis is ignoring her order and not leaving Mishima. Itoichi's not surprised because this isn't the first time that Artemis has behaved like this. The colonel interrupts them to remind them that Artemis is very special. Artemis can speak telepathically over distance in the human tongue. The colonel says that it's actually to their advantage that Artemis is at Mishima Mall. That Kaiju is a real star, so he wants to hear what his report said. Riko explains that Tetsuo is indeed at Mishima Mall with the flaming Kaiju Tamer. The colonel knows all about that place and about how there are 200 people living there. Tetsuo's machine is there as well, along with the ignorant masses. We see that the colonel is actually a lunatic, as he said that Mishima Mall is lucky for having everything. Riko shows how evil they all are, as she wants to confirm that their goal is to wipe out every single person there. She points out that their top priority is to steal the flaming Kaiju, so she wonders if there's really a need to wipe everyone out. The colonel says that she has it wrong because they will first use them as hostages and then eliminate them. The colonel scratches his eyeball and explains that they don't need anyone other than the people who seek Vierde's salvation. He declares that the little pig straw house is about to be blown away and there will be a feast. These 6 wolves are heading there now and nothing will get in their way. 1 week after Tetsuo's arrival at Mishima Mall, we see that he's now working together with Hagane inside her mother's workshop. They have just completed something, and Hagane gets emotional. She explains that her mind has been so at ease lately. She admits that she hasn't been sleeping well since she started using gunpowder. She is sure that Tetsuo wasn't bothered by it though, because he's used to both danger and gunpowder. Tetsuo can only wonder why she started building something like this in the first place. Hagane doesn't respond, and instead she asks Tetsuo to do something a little unusual. She asks him to crouch down in front of her and explains that it's sort of a ritual. Someone has always done this to her, so now she would like to do it in the person's place. Hagane places her hand on his head and gives him a gentle pat. She says good job, and after a few moments, she begins to feel strange. She quickly wraps it up and thanks him for his cooperation. Tetsuo immediately passes out again, and Hagane thinks about how weird that felt. She was always the one getting patted, so she didn't know what it would feel like the other way around. Hagane remembers her mother praising her, and she looks at what they just built. That evening, the Takamura family sits down for dinner together. Hagane thinks about how it's been 45 days since her mother passed away. For some reason, it doesn't feel strange at all that Tetsuo's sitting in her mother's seat. It even feels like there was a time when there were 5 of them in the family. Unfortunately, these nice thoughts lead to some darker ones. She pictures how terrified her mother must have been in her final moments. She also thinks about the sound of her mother being devoured by a kaiju and says that she can still hear it even now. Later that night, Tetsuo wakes up to go to the bathroom and finds a letter on top of him. This one is from Hagane, who thanks him for helping her out. She reveals in the letter that her mother's life was taken by a kaiju that devoured her. Tetsuo is shocked to learn this, and we see that Hagane has gone outside all by herself. It's freezing, and she gets the feeling that she's doing something incredibly stupid. She's all by herself because she's sure that anyone she told would try to stop her. She gets the feeling that something terrible is about to happen to her because of her bad luck, and a giant kaiju appears. This kaiju is Artemis, and he smells a familiar scent. Artemis was the one that devoured Hagane's mother, and he was about to eat her as well. The only reason he couldn't devour Hagane is because the flaming kaiju showed up to stop him. He missed out on devouring her that day, but he won't let it happen again. Meanwhile, Hagane thinks about how her mother's life was ended by this kaiju. That's why she takes back everything she said about having bad luck. She determines that luck is on her side because she can now get revenge on the kaiju that took her mom. Hagane tells her mother to watch, and Artemis attacks her. To his surprise, Hagane dodges his attack, and he wonders if she's really human. It turns out that Hagane activated the boots that she just finished building. She calls them the Erde Anti-Kaiju Outer Hover Boots. It's a Takamura workshop special, and she plans to use them against the kaiju. She explains that she worked with Tetsuo to modify the Erde close combat gear for use on snow. The terrifying kaiju moves towards her, but Hagane reminds herself that she can fight now. A look back shows that Tetsuo was worried because the boots were made for emergency evacuation. If the enemy is being serious, then she won't be able to dodge it so easily. Hagane doesn't care because her real plan was to attack anyway. She pulls out the giant weapon she created, but Artemis is not impressed. He calls Hagane a moron and says that she could never end his life with a weapon like that. He continues his charge, and he's glad that he finally gets to eat some more meat. Another look back shows Tetsuo teaching Hagane about the kaiju. He explained that they are heat resistant and they can recover fast. Even if Hagane managed to injure one by slamming her device into its mouth, it wouldn't be fatal. Hagane surprised Tetsuo as she said that was fine with her. The kaiju wouldn't have to die because that wasn't what she was aiming for. Back to the present, Hagane fires her weapon and she thinks about her mother. She tells her to watch once more because if it works, she would like to be praised again. Hagane's weapon explodes in the kaiju's mouth and he feels intense pain. Both his mouth and his throat are now covered in blades and the pain is excruciating. Hagane explains that the projectile explodes in stages as it propels forward. At the same time, a ton of barbed spikes are released, digging deep into the kaiju's mouth and throat. Now even the slightest vibration of the kaiju's vocal cords will trigger intense pain. The kaiju screams in agony, and this just causes even more pain. Hagane is incredibly pleased as she declares that this kaiju will never be able to eat ever again. This was her goal the entire time, and it's finally complete. Hagane breaks down and says that she just misses her mom. She knows what's coming next, and she sobs as she thinks about her mother. The kaiju moves in to end her life, but Tetsuo comes out of nowhere to save her. He slices its arm off, and he's just glad that he and Yukio made it in time. Yukio tells the kaiju to get out of his sight, or they will finish the job. Artemis doesn't waste any time, and he runs for his life. Tetsuo rushes to Hagane's side, but he trips and falls on top of her. The two of them begin to panic, but Tetsuo quickly gathers himself. He tells Hagane that she did a good job, and she begins to sob uncontrollably. Just then, Yukio notices that some fog is moving in, and he realizes something terrible. He urgently tells Tetsuo to get inside. He isn't sure what it is, but he has a really bad feeling. 5 kilometers away, we see that the colonel's rapidly approaching. He knows that Artemis has been defeated, but he says that it won't be a problem. He announces that they're in a good position, and we see that they have several monsters with them. One of his subordinates tells the kaiju named Arrows to fire, and it launches something. Back at the mall, we see that everyone is happily enjoying their lives. Ao has escaped punishment again, and Furumaki can only wonder how she keeps doing it. Unfortunately, we see that Yukio has been struck by an attack, and he explodes. We then get a look back to 19 years ago in 2025. When the intergalactic kaiju first invaded Earth was formed to fight back, and a man named Sagami decided to enlist. Right away, it becomes clear that Sagami is exceptionally gifted. He does really well during his shooting test, and the instructor says that not many people could get a 70% success rate at this distance. His fellow soldiers are in complete awe of his abilities, and one of them says that having a guy like him around makes everyone else look bad. Thanks to his natural gifts and relentless diligence, it wasn't long before Sagami became a force to be reckoned with within the Erde ranks. He distinguished himself in combat, and his rise through the organization continued at a steady pace. One night, Sagami told the other soldiers that they had to finish off a kaiju in this area no matter what. They can't let it enter the city because it will be a nightmare. The kaiju goes on an absolute rampage, and several of the soldiers run for their lives. Sagami stays behind, and he one-shots the kaiju with a huge cannon. The survivors all cheer for him, and they call Sagami their savior. They chant savior over and over again, and Sagami takes it all in. Sagami keeps on going with his unrivaled diligence, and he single-handedly wins many battles. He stands out among all the other soldiers, and his rise through the ranks only continues. His comrades even started to tell him that he was really going to accomplish something that no one ever could have imagined. They said that he would be humanity's savior, and Sagami was starting to really like how that sounded. Then one day the news broke about a 9-year-old boy named Tetsuo who piloted a robot. Tetsuo was a complete unknown, but he defeated a kaiju single-handedly. People on social media started calling Tetsuo a savior, and it was clear that Sagami didn't like that. Later, a soldier was furious when he heard that Erde was drawing down their troops in response to this. He couldn't understand how anyone could believe that Tetsuo could save the entire world all by himself. Sagami told him that the top brass simply decided that robots were superior and that the results spoke for themselves. There was nothing they could do about it, so they should only focus on what they could control. With no other option, Sagami went to find answers about the robots. He went on to test a simulator to see how effective robots really were in kaiju battle, and he was not impressed. He reported that it was not as responsive as he had hoped, and he questioned whether robots were truly effective at all. Meanwhile, Tetsuo continued to make headlines. He defeated kaiju after kaiju, and always kept damage to an absolute minimum. Tetsuo was very timid, but the people he saved were never shy about showing him praise. People called him their true savior, and the world adored him. The normally emotionless Sagami didn't like that one bit, and he called Tetsuo a thorn in his side. He had no choice but to watch Tetsuo's rise with growing bitterness. One day an alarm sounded as 3 intergalactic kaiju were spotted, all at the same time. More were coming, so Sagami and the other soldiers went to battle. Their unit was completely overwhelmed, so Sagami told his men to retreat. As everyone fled, Sagami attacked the kaiju like an absolute monster. He pumped it full of bullets and faced the beast with no fear. The kaiju was ready to end his life, and Sagami declared that he was the world's savior. He was prepared for it to end his life, but Tetsuo came out of nowhere to defeat the kaiju. Of course, Sagami was furious, as he had grown to hate Tetsuo, and he even pointed his weapon at him. Unfortunately for him, he was out of ammo, and he could do nothing but watch in anger. From that day forward, getting promoted was the one thing on Sagami's mind, and he did so at an unprecedented pace. Once he had the rank and the power, he put his long-term scheme into motion. He stood before Earth leadership and declared that it was reckless and even foolish to place all of humanity's fate in the hands of Tetsuo. He argued that there didn't have to be only one savior. With truly gifted children and himself as captain instructor, they could surpass Tetsuo entirely. He promised that this was the real way to save the world, and the crowd cheered for him. In 2030, Sagami's vision became a reality. In order to produce the next generation of saviors to follow in Tetsuo's footsteps, a team comprised of children was formed under the Earth banner. Sagami told these children that they were to replace Tetsuo to save the world and to be known to the public as the saviors. This group eventually became known as Verde. Then came 2034 and the Big Freeze. In 2035, the final battle fought by Tetsuo and Erde ended in failure, and the name Verde faded from memory. Sagami's great plan seemed to have completely collapsed. However, he and those children survived the brutal conditions and came out the other side even stronger. After even more time passed, word reached Sagami that Tetsuo had returned from outer space. He muttered to himself that Tetsuo really was a nuisance who just couldn't be finished off even at the edge of the universe. He declared that Verde would take both Mishima Mall's flaming kaiju and Tetsuo's new machine. As far as he was concerned, there was no need for any saviors except for Verde. Back to the present, Yukio tells Tetsuo to get inside because he has a really bad feeling. Sagami's subordinate fires his kaiju's weapon, and the attack sends projectiles straight toward Yukio. The attack lands, and Yukio takes devastating damage. Tetsuo is horrified, and he rushes to Yukio's side. Sagami and his group celebrate, as one of them says that the blow completely nailed him. Sagami then declares that luck is completely on their side now. With Tetsuo pulled away from the mall, and Yukio now shattered, Mishima Mall has lost its most potent weapon. However, one member of the group named Yuma doesn't look happy. The colonel acknowledges that her kaiju running wild on its own was not part of the plan. However, it did succeed in drawing Tetsuo out, so the colonel tells Yuma well done. Yuma says that she can't feel good about it because Artemis lost his life in the process. She doesn't have a kaiju now, which means that she can't be of any use to the colonel anymore. Sagami tells her not to worry because she can just watch from behind him. Sagami says it with his crazy person charm, and Yuma eats it up. He reaffirms that they are Verde, and the torch of salvation has already been lit. As for Tetsuo, Sagami declares that he will personally end his life. The team cheers, and Sagami jokes about how Tetsuo is probably wailing tearfully about his broken robot right now. In crazy person fashion, he also does an impersonation of what Tetsuo must be like. Unfortunately for him, he is very wrong. Tetsuo and Yukio come out of nowhere, and they chop off the reindeer kaiju's antler. They're doing massive damage, and Sagami can't believe that they already recovered. Yukio is also surprised, as he notices that there are people on top of the kaiju. He determines that he has to avoid hurting the humans while ending the kaiju's life. He only has one sword, but he still uses his six-sword style attack. The colonel realizes what is happening, and he tells Otoichi to send the other Verde members over to their own kaiju. Tetsuo lands an immense attack, but he's shocked when it misses. One of the kaijus used its ability, and the entire Verde team vanished in an instant. Tetsuo is speechless, because that should be impossible. He has said the word impossible many times since coming back, but teleportation is just too much. Yukio is stunned as well, and equally impressed by this teleportation. Sagami recognizes the voice coming out of this robot, and he realizes something. It's now clear to him that Yukio has switched bodies. Tetsuo begins to question what is impossible when it comes to kaiju and supernatural powers. The flames on Ao's kaiju are just as impossible, so he wonders what's going on. Sagami acknowledges that what their kaiju are capable of has made Tetsuo's head spin. He explains that some people believe that humans only use 10% or less of their brain's full potential. If someone could release the remaining 90%, they could theoretically access what he calls hyperphysical powers, those like teleportation and pyrokinesis. However, Sagami declares that it's all complete nonsense. He uses the analogy of upgrading a vacuum cleaner with an ultra-high-performance computer, and he wonders if that would suddenly give it the functions of a microwave. Of course, the answer is no. You can unlock the software's full potential, but the hardware still has its limitations. An ordinary human body simply cannot produce fire or teleport, no matter how powerful the brain behind it becomes. Even a brain with capacity to spare can't ever wield supernatural powers if it's stuck in an ordinary body. He then asks Tetsuo to consider what happens when a kaiju body that can shapeshift in any environment connects with a human brain that has untapped latent potential. With the kaiju's instincts and its nature as a natural predator, it would access supernatural powers. He explains that they would be capable of anything, and Tetsuo starts to put it together. He looks around at all these special kaiju and determines that each of them also uses unknown powers. Yukio is also shocked as he realizes what the real relationship is between the kaiju tamers and their kaiju. The colonel confirms that the humans who control kaiju are essentially remote brains, delivering the full potential of the kaiju's hardware. Put simply, the kaiju are upgrading through the humans that control them. Tetsuo is shaken by all of this, and our heroes notice that they are surrounded. Hagane demands to know who these people are and why they're doing this to other humans. The colonel doesn't answer, and his subordinates simply laugh. Hagane then realizes that it doesn't matter who they are right now. What matters is that their lives are in danger, and that Yukio has already lost half of his body. They are facing 5 kaiju, and 5 humans who are all kaiju tamers, just like Ao. They are at a terrible disadvantage, and the situation is almost too much to process. Back at the mall, Ao enjoys herself as she spins in a chair, and her friends tell her to get serious. Just then, Ao notices something strange as she looks at the night sky. Back with our hero, Sagami speaks to his inner self. He tells himself that his Verde will not lose, especially not to Tetsuo. He vows to end Tetsuo's life with his own hands, and he decides to change his plan. Instead of heading to Mishima first, they will put all hands on deck to eliminate Tetsuo right now. Hagane wonders what they're going to do, and she sees that Tetsuo has gone completely silent. The situation is seemingly hopeless, but Tetsuo still does the one thing he knows. He takes position and prepares for battle. The slightest movement from Tetsuo's hand as he takes control of Yukio sends chills through Sagami's spine. He tells Atoichi to send something to each of the other kaiju tamers because this is a code orange. Atoichi is shocked because this never happens, but Sagami tells him to just do it. Atoichi uses his kaiju's ability and sends orange cards to the other Verde members. One of them is surprised because he feels like he can eliminate the robot himself. It's an easy target, and he wonders if a code orange is really necessary. Meanwhile, Tetsuo has already decided that there is no need for him to think in this situation. The kaiju tamers then tell their kaiju to move in. Tetsuo prepares for the battle of his life, but he is surprised when the enemy just runs right past him. They are putting their mission above all else and retreating. Just like that, the entire Verde team vanishes, except for one. The colonel points out that they would have won, but at the cost of losing at least 3 of their kaiju. Sagami is as calculated as ever, and he declares that he never makes mistakes. He wonders if Tetsuo knows where his kaiju horde is headed, and our heroes are horrified when they realize the answer. Sagami reveals that they're heading straight for Mishima Mall with an estimated arrival time of 4 to 5 minutes. He points out that this is also Tetsuo's time limit. Tetsuo realizes that he has to defeat the remaining enemies and catch up to the kaiju horde before it reaches the mall. If he doesn't, then everyone inside will be wiped out. The colonel begins a countdown, and he points out that Tetsuo stood completely still for a full 10 seconds. Sagami calls him the wavering warrior and tells him that Verity is coming. Yukio angrily tells him to get out of the way and he moves in for an attack. He is stunned though, as he is launched out of the snow with just one blow. A terrifying beast is attacking them and our heroes are shocked. Sagami commands his creature to trample them, and his kaiju named Hercules begins its attack. As Hercules moves into attack, Sagami continues his countdown. Another 10 seconds have passed, so he says that Tetsuo is running out of time. Yukio desperately reminds Tetsuo that they have to take out this enemy and go after the kaiju horde before it reaches Mishima Mall. This new kaiju came out of the snow, and Tetsuo can tell that it's the most powerful one yet. Its attack was so fast that Tetsuo couldn't even respond. Sagami taunts Tetsuo by pointing out that he returned to this frozen earth 10 years too late. He wonders if Tetsuo can defeat Hercules and protect his new home. It's time to find out, so he tells Hercules to begin his attack. The battle begins immediately, and Hercules is blindingly fast. Tetsuo can barely handle it, so he tells Yukio that now is the time to do something. Yukio already knows, so he activates his convertible type escape pod called Snowflake. He becomes very serious as he uses its hidden function number 2. Tetsuo gets ready to see something amazing, but it just turns out to be a jump seat for Hagane to sit on. Tetsuo wonders why Yukio would even have this. Yukio then explains what happened when his final form was being designed. Yukio was the one that came up with the idea for an escape pod that could also transform into a robot. Tetsuo's father loved the idea, and he wondered if Yukio had any more. That's when Yukio said that he wanted the escape pod to accommodate multiple riders. Yukio was sure that over a 2-year-long trip through space, Tetsuo was bound to make at least one friend. Yukio was so confident about this that he said that Tetsuo would want his friends to join him on the escape pod. It's been 10 years since then, so Yukio is delighted because Tetsuo is finally putting it to use. Yukio gets emotional because the escape pod has several other functions to accommodate Tetsuo's friends. One of them is a grill, and another turns into a table to play board games. After Hagane gets seated, Tetsuo tells her to hold on. Things get a little bumpy as Tetsuo avoids one of the monster's attacks. Atoichi can't believe that he dodged it, but Sagami explains that that's not all Tetsuo did. He set himself up for a counter, so now he lands his 6-sword style attack. It manages to do some damage to the beast, and they come back to Earth. Sagami realizes that Tetsuo wasn't actually able to dodge the attack. Tetsuo apologizes to Yukio because he had to sacrifice himself to land that counterattack. The damage he took only shows now as Yukio collapses to the ground. Hercules landed a back kick at the very last moment, so our heroes realize that he's crazy powerful. They realize that the enemy has figured out their attacks and things are not looking good. Hagane calls out to Tetsuo and he's shocked to see that she's crying. She apologizes and says that she feels awful about how powerless she is. However, she's not just crying out of hopelessness because she has figured something out. She tells Tetsuo that the enemy is almost certainly attacking with a plan and that they're building up to strike at a specific time. She says that 3 in the morning is when things will really escalate because that's when Ao always slips out of the mall to go exploring. Back at the mall, Ao prepares to do just that. She sings a song about what they might find on their little journey, and her friend says that she's a great singer. Furamaki declares that the best thing they could find is the world's savior. Everyone agrees, and they head out to explore. Hagane explains to Tetsuo that Ao always leaves the mall around the same time. Without Ao there to give orders, Land of Men will simply go on sleeping no matter what happens. Even if the enemy attacks directly, the kaiju buried under the mall will not respond. This is devastating information because he determines that they won't make it in time. Tetsuo processes all of this as the countdown continues. He knows that they are outmatched, and he knows that they can't defeat these kaiju quickly enough. He thinks hard about what the enemy wants, what Mishima Mall's vulnerabilities are, what they are lacking, and how to make up for it. Tetsuo then reminds himself that battles are about strategy. He concludes that for them to win, this battle can't be about defeating the enemy. Instead, it has to be about defending the mall. He doesn't have enough information on how to do that properly, but even so, he declares that they have to use every resource that they have. Tetsuo then makes a decision that surprises even Yukio. He tells Yukio to activate the speakers because he wants to try talking to the colonel directly. He wants to ask what he wants and why he needs to attack them. Yukio is stunned because the old Tetsuo would have never considered doing something like that. Tetsuo has always avoided communicating, but now he's going to use it to solve a problem. Yukio reflects on how much Tetsuo has changed since arriving at Mishima Mall. By removing the fence around his heart and having a positive attitude about meeting people, Tetsuo has developed something he never had before, the capability to not fear others. This is a big step for Tetsuo, so Yukio can't help but get emotional. Tetsuo says that if he can find out what the colonel has in mind, then he might be able to come up with a way to win. Yukio is really proud of him because for the first time on this frozen earth, Tetsuo has gained the courage to step forward. The colonel continues his countdown and reveals that 2 minutes have already passed. Just then they notice that Yukio is displaying the letter T. They wonder if it stands for truce or time. Tetsuo then takes a moment and summons all of his courage. He thinks back to all his failed attempts at communication, all the awkward moments and the wrong words, every time he said ahoy instead of hello, and blurted out best do instead of good luck. Yukio watches and gives him encouragement over and over again. Finally, Tetsuo speaks directly to the colonel and asks why he would do something like this. Everyone goes completely silent as they are shocked. Yukio breaks the silence to express how amazing that was. Tetsuo even surprised himself, but he points out that they still have to hear the answer to his question. The colonel laughs and he says that he would be happy to answer. He reveals that the reason Vierdi is doing all of this is to save the world. He explains that the humanoid variant that caused the big freeze is still in Tokyo, and Vierdi intends to be the ones to bring it down. To accomplish that goal, they decided that they would borrow the flaming kaiju from Mishima Mall. Tetsuo gets an idea, but Yukio wonders if he's making a mistake. This is his first time communicating, and the stakes are really high. Tetsuo immediately suggests that if that's their goal, then they could collaborate instead. Everyone is surprised, as the colonel seems to actually consider this for a moment. As he thinks about it, Yukio wonders if he did something wrong. Things might go bad because he just allowed Tetsuo to communicate with the enemy. The colonel once again shows his crazy side as he loses control of his emotions. He says that it's completely unfair that Tetsuo keeps taking the spotlight when he is so inadequate. He says that not a day goes by that he doesn't pray for Tetsuo's failure. He declares that Tetsuo is always in his way and he wants his life to end. Their communication finishes and Tetsuo is left in shock. He sits in darkness and thinks about why he built that fence around his heart in the first place. The colonel snaps his fingers again, so Hercules continues his attack. He rushes in with a powerful strike and Yukio gets pushed back. Hercules presses his assault relentlessly and our heroes struggle to just survive. Yukio's particle tank is hit and the situation becomes truly desperate. Tetsuo calls out to Yukio, but Hercules is already preparing his next attack. Tetsuo is then horrified as Hercules slices off another piece of Yukio. Yukio can barely speak as he tells our hero not to cry and he collapses to the ground. He can hardly move, but the colonel isn't done yet. He tells Hercules to keep going on the offensive and to never stop. He wants Hercules to end Tetsuo's life so the beast starts stomping on Yukio. Tetsuo is falling apart as he realizes that he failed. The enemy forces will reach the mall and everyone's life will end. Tetsuo's mind spirals even further as he keeps thinking about his failed communication with the colonel. He quickly stops this way of thinking and tells himself to fly away. His only goal now is to get to Mishima Mall as fast as he can. They need to go at max speed, so Yukio activates his augmenter. They blast away as fast as they can, and Yukio thinks about how they need to fly up to where Hercules' attacks can't reach them. Unfortunately, Hercules catches up to them, and our heroes can't believe it. This beast reacted incredibly fast and took off at the exact same time they did. It saw their plan and countered it without hesitation. Tetsuo questions if they're going to lose again, and he wonders if he really can't defeat this kaiju. His father always told him that he was important because he has the ability to kill kaiju. That's all he ever had to offer, but right now he can't even do that. Sagami screams for him to die one more time, and Hercules prepares his final attack. Yukio yells in frustration because he can't do anything right now, so he locks his controls. Yukio takes control of himself just long enough to land a counterattack. Sagami is shocked, and Tetsuo can't believe that they actually landed an attack. Yukio uses another maneuver that gets him hit, but he manages to get away. They escape for now, and Yukio apologizes to Tetsuo for taking control. He gives control back to him, and Tetsuo is the next to apologize. He's devastated because Yukio is all beat up, and he expresses how ashamed he is. He says that a guy like him had no right to get carried away and try to communicate. He thought for a moment that he had grown, and that maybe he could manage somehow. He calls himself a moron and says that he was wrong. Tetsuo realizes now that he's always been the same and has not changed at all. He says that he always destroys everything and that he wants to stop being himself. He determines that his mistake was trying to do more than he's capable of. Yukio feels terrible because he was really proud of how much Tetsuo has grown. He desperately tries to find the right words to reach Tetsuo, but he struggles. Yukio blames himself because this body doesn't have the specs that they need to win against Hercules. They need to get to the village fast, but he can't even generate a decent speed. He says that none of this is Tetsuo's fault because this body can't reflect even 10% of Tetsuo's skills. Yukio continues to search for the right words, but he can't find them. He wants to assure Tetsuo that things will be okay because they are together, but there's a problem with that. Yukio has come to realize that it was his own existence that drove Tetsuo into solitude. He begs for the right words to come out, but nothing happens. The guys are falling into despair, but they are shocked when Hagane holds Tetsuo's hand. She is doing her best to stay composed, but her face is covered in tears. She eventually breaks down and says that getting attacked was terrifying. The thought of her life ending and losing everything was too much for her to bear. She feels terrible for Tetsuo because she had no idea that such scary thoughts were always on his mind. Tetsuo has been fighting Kaiju for almost his entire life, and she feels terrible for him. Tetsuo is at a complete loss for words because fighting Kaiju has been normal for him for such a long time. However, Hagane's trembling hand reminds him that his attempts to win against the Kaiju were not all for nothing. He is touched by Hagane's sympathy, and the two cry together. Yukio moves to join hands with them, but he pulls his hand back. Instead, he declares that he's going to go even faster now, and they blast off. He declares that they absolutely have to reach them all before the Kaiju. Just then, Yukio picks up an unexpected incoming transmission. After everything that happened, receiving any kind of signal is shocking. Civilization was supposed to have been wiped out. After a slight delay, Yukio receives a coded message from the same unknown sender. He deciphers it and reads it out loud. The message says to stay away because the Kaiju have already arrived. Tetsuo and Yukio are stunned, and they can only wonder who on earth sent that message. Meanwhile, we see that the Verde team has arrived at the mall. It's quiet and peaceful inside as everyone sleeps, but the team doesn't like how nonchalant they are. They're disgusted because these people are just sleeping away, completely unaware of the threat closing in on them. The little yellow guy marvels at how warm it is around the mall and how there's no ice anywhere near it. He's delighted to see that this is the power of the flaming Kaiju that's keeping everything alive. The guy named Tamer wonders if there might be another way to handle this. Something more peaceful, like getting the pilots inside to join forces with them. Akagi shows that she's just as crazy as the colonel as she shuts down the idea. She declares that it won't work because Verde has to become the only saviors. She reminds the others that this is the only way to make the colonel's dream come true. She points out that that's what they all signed up for. The little yellow guy cheerfully points out that the colonel authorized them to eliminate anyone who refuses to side with Verde. He talks just like the colonel as he says that these people are the ignorant masses. He says that he doesn't even know what ignorant masses means, so Tamaya gets annoyed with him. He gets back to the mission and declares that to be safe, they're going to surround these people from all sides. He tells the guy in the sky named Eris to wait for his first shot, then head south. Tamaya announces that they're going to destroy the village while the enemy pilots are away and help themselves to that kaiju that's down below. They march forward, but the little yellow guy wonders if they can turn on their radio. They turn them off to be cautious, but he says that there's no way that the village has the equipment to listen in on them. Tamaya allows it because any way you look at it, this place is just a schoolhouse, so they probably don't have much technology. The little guy talks like a moron, so Tamaya wonders when everyone fell under the colonel's spell. Eris points out that Tamaya isn't perfect either. He mocks him for trying to find a more peaceful solution, and he says that he's becoming soft. He wonders if this reminds him of when they were kids before they entered Erde. Tamaya says that he doesn't remember any of that, and all he knows is that he's always been serious about becoming a savior. He pauses for a moment while thinking about how the earth has frozen over, and then he admits that at least he thought that's what he wanted. The attack then begins as Tamaya orders Eros to use its ability called predation posture. Its antlers grow really long in every direction, and they even have monsters on the end. We learn that Eros excels at bombardment. It shoots missiles of diverse shapes with unmatched accuracy. It produces a wide range of projectiles tailored to the situation and fires them. Tamer instructs Eros to use its grenades at maximum firepower. He wants the villagers to feel so hopeless that they won't have the will to fight back. Tamer declares that once the survivors start surrendering, everything will go smoothly. Finally, he tells Eros to fire, and it launches its missiles. The countless missiles strike the village, causing explosions everywhere. When the dust settles, the entire team is shocked to see that the village was protected by a barrier. Tamer only now realizes that this is no ordinary schoolhouse. Eris said that they're not the helpless mall that they thought they were, who would barely survive through a kaiju's powers. We see that the modified schoolhouse has been engaged, and the anti-kaiju barrier is fully operational. Inside the schoolhouse, the boss is told that the anti-kaiju barrier is operating as expected. She calls it a waste of energy, but she's reminded that they can't afford to worry about that right now. Meanwhile, Takeru is relieved to see that his call to Tetsuo finally went through. The boss gets very serious and declares that it's time for them to strike back. Outside, Tamer is still surprised to see that they have a barrier strong enough to block Eros' bombardment. The little yellow guy points out that a barrier is a military weapon, so you can't understand why the school would have one. Eris calls Makoto stupid and says that the answer is simple. Someone retrofitted the school with advanced technology. Someone made sure that the village would be ready for a kaiju battle. From what he can tell, this person has been planning this for ages. Eris thought that they would be obliterating some sleepy civilians, but an all-out battle is even better. He is sure that they will be formidable foes, and Tamer agrees with him. His guess proves to be right as the school reveals that it has missiles of its own. Turrets and missile launchers pop up everywhere, and the boss is told that they are ready to fire. The boss says that she wouldn't brush them off as lightweights if she were the enemy. She signals for them to fire, and their counterattack begins. Missiles fly right at the attackers, but Tamer is insulted. He wonders who they think they are, and he uses his love bazooka multi-missile. His kaiju's antlers break into hundreds of projectiles, and they counter every missile. All the village's missiles have been shot down, but the boss simply says that they will continue. Outside, Eris is having a great time because Mishima Mall is putting up a good fight. He tells his kaiju to attack, so it starts bashing on the barrier. One of the operators panics because the barrier is getting absolutely pummeled. The boss reminds him to stay focused and keep returning fire. Turret shots and missiles are sent out, but Eris dodges them all. He tells the villagers to enjoy themselves because once they are out of barrier and missiles, they will all lose their lives. He is sure that they won't last much longer, and he is thrilled by having to dodge so much. Tamer shoots down all the missiles chasing Eris, and he says that he's having too much fun. Eris calls him a moron because they're going to win this fight easily. Meanwhile, Akagi and her kaiju come out of the ground, and Makoto and his kaiju come out of its shell. They were defending themselves from the village's attack, but the boss isn't done yet. She says focus again and tells her men to fire. Meanwhile, we see that the colonel and the rest of his team are rapidly approaching. Atoichi explains that once they're over the mountain ahead, they will reach Mishima Mall. The colonel doesn't respond, and the others are surprised to see that something's bothering him. Hercules stops running because he's in a great deal of pain, and the colonel cries out. His kaiju coughs up blood, and it becomes very clear that he took a lot of damage. Oichichi's completely stunned because he can't believe that the blow from Tetsuo's attack inflicted this much damage. Hercules is in a great deal of pain, so the colonel throws a tantrum. He screams that he was sure that he could eliminate Tetsuo, and he keeps cursing in disbelief. Atoichi tells Yuma that when the colonel's tantrum is over, they will head to Mishima Mall themselves. He reminds her that Hercules can make a full and immediate recovery from injuries that would take 3 days for other kaiju. He will be more durable, sharper, and more murderous. Meanwhile, Tetsuo is surprised to learn about a high-altitude search drone that has been watching everything. It belongs to the mall, and it's called Suzu. Takamura explains that its batteries won't last much longer, but it can search for people from the mall in the mountains by soaring way up in the sky. Suzu is the name of Hagene's mother, and it was originally her idea. After she passed, it was developed by the head of the technology department. Suzu always said that with her daughter always trying to sneak out of the mall behind her back, a machine that could search for her would come in handy. Even the barrier that's protecting the village right now was built by the tech department head and Hagene's mom. A brief flashback shows that Takemura woke up to find the letter that Hagane left him. He was shocked to learn that Hagane was going to get revenge, so he sent Suzu to look for her. That's when he found Tetsuo in battle against Hercules, and he wished that Hagane was with him. It was thanks to this that they saw the attackers approaching. Takamura showed the boss, and she was able to react in time. She ordered for everyone to be woken up so they could evacuate. This also gave them enough time to make preparations with their anti-kaiju weapons. Back to the present, Takamura is sure that it was a coincidence that Hagane chose tonight to seek revenge. However, thanks to her, they were able to get the barrier up in time. He reminds Hagane that they have her mom on their side, and she gets emotional. Takamura then tells them not to come to the mall, but Tetsuo wonders if that's really a good idea. Takamura says that it's okay because everyone has evacuated. They're going down to research lab number 1 that was used by the tech department years ago. They get there by going down a huge hole, and Takamura sends him the coordinates. He explains that it's an evacuation site for emergencies like this. Everyone is evacuating through the passageway that Land of Men dug, and Takamura wants the 3 of them to join them. Tetsuo heads there, and he wonders what kind of danger they're in. Yukio misunderstood as well, so he asks how many enemies are heading towards the evacuation site. He assumes that they're going there to protect the evacuees from an attack, but that's not the case. Takamura tells them that he's only sending them there because they're going to evacuate too. Our heroes are shocked because the thought of running away themselves never crossed their mind. Takamura can't believe that they were planning to keep fighting because even he can tell that they're all beat up. He says that even Tetsuo's face looks like it took damage from an intense fight, but Yukio reveals that Tetsuo was just crying after the enemy told him to die. Takamura is shocked to learn that he talked to the enemy, and he says that everyone hurts in different ways. The boss instructs them to stop chatting and tells our 3 heroes to evacuate. Their communication ends, and Takamura points out that was the boss's first time talking to Tetsuo. The boss used to be part of her day, so Takamura wonders if she should have told Tetsuo. The boss doesn't respond, and she simply wonders how the evacuation is going. She's told that the evacuation is moving very fast. 90% of residents have already made it down to the underground passageway. The remaining 10% are still in the schoolhouse. The boss knows that they won't make it in time because the reserve power keeping the barrier up is nearly depleted. Just as she feared, their power runs out and the barrier shuts down. The Verde team watches the village go dark, and Ares confronts the boss with his kaiju. He destroys the device that created the barrier, and he taunts the village for not having it anymore. The boss is furious as she explains that was their prized electricity generated by Land of Men, which they stored for several years. Ares can't hear them inside, but he says if they have any last words, they should say them. He explains that he will simply read their lips, but he wonders if they have a lip reader on their side. The boss gets the message, so she makes it very easy for him to read her lips. She declares that she has nothing to say, and she calls him a very bad word. Ares is delighted by her straightforward attitude, and he wonders if the old woman is ex-military. Ares calls everyone in the room his hostages, and he tells them to just sit tight. What they are doing is not personal, it's just a job that they need to do for their dream to come true. He explains that they heard that the flaming kaiju's underground and they will be taking it. Meanwhile, we see that Suzu is still looking at everything that's happening. Hercules is still recovering, and Tetsuo has arrived at the evacuation site. Meanwhile, Furumaki's upset at himself for crashing into a crevice while trying to get back to the mall. The boss just spoke to him, so he knows that there's no time for this because the mall is under attack by kaiju. Furumaki continues to blame himself, but Shindo tells him that anyone would panic in this situation. She says that they will head to the evacuation site on foot and tells him that the mall will be fine. The reason for this is because their savior Ao is already on the way. We see that Ao is furious as she runs at max speed to get back home. She calls herself an idiot over and over again for leaving the mall unguarded. She says that her ability to connect with Land of Men and her body that's almost like a kaiju is worthless if she can't protect the mall. She quickly tells herself to calm down because the mall has dependable adults that are already there. Her hair turns into flames as she approaches the village. She gets within range and screams for Land of Men to wake up. The Verde team is shocked to see her appear, and they notice her white hair. Ares wonders if she is who he thinks she is, and he gets his answer soon enough. Land of Men hears Ao scream, and he wakes up from his slumber. Akagi feels it getting hot underground, and a giant flame comes bursting onto the surface. The light from the flame is blinding, and the heat is scorching. Eris can't help but feel overwhelmed, and he has no words to describe what he's seeing. Ao declares that they have worked very hard to build peace in this mall, and she is furious about the attackers trying to hurt it. She says that this is no time for humans to be fighting each other, and she unleashes a ton of power. She calls out Land of Men's name, and he begins his attack. Eris says that they can't attack him because he has hostages, but he's shocked to see that they are gone. He still finds comfort in the fact that there are 3 against 1. He decides to simply destroy the flaming kaiju so he can take it home. Eris tells his own kaiju to move in and declares that they will have a kaiju aerial battle. Ao doesn't back down for even a moment, and she charges right at him. Inside the school, everyone wonders if the enemy is gone. The boss checks the drone footage and confirms that all the enemies have headed towards Ao. Meanwhile, Tamer reminds the other Verde members that they still have the upper hand. Their goal is to defeat the flaming kaiju, so they begin their attack. Ao realizes that they're in trouble because the enemy can attack from a distance. This only proves to be a distraction though, as Eris lands an attack from behind them. They fall to the ground, and Eris mocks them for sinking deeper because of the flaming kaiju's body heat. The little yellow guy claims victory, but Tamaya points out that it isn't over. He wants a clear victory, and reminds everyone that it's 3-on-1. Eris declares that they will be taking the flaming kaiju, and nothing will stop them. The village won't last long without its heat source, but he says that they will just have to make that sacrifice. He announces that Verde will save the world, and the boss is shocked to hear that name. The boss just now recognizes the shoulder patch that the enemy is wearing. It reads 2400 Brigade Verde. She remembers hearing rumors about this unit during her time at Erde. It was led by a man named Sagami, who was known as a fine soldier. He came from a good family, was loved by his comrades, and he was decorated for numerous achievements. He was spoken of incredibly highly within the Erde ranks. Even as he rose through the ranks at an absurd speed, even as his direct supervisors and opponents mysteriously died under suspicious circumstances, nobody made much noise about it. After a while, rumors started swirling that Sagami was going after the savior. There were also whispers among the Erde higher-ups that an anti-Tetsuo faction was growing, and that behind the scenes, the movement was gaining real momentum. Shortly after, Sagami's Verde project was officially approved. Sagami's goal was to create a savior brigade of children who had achieved scores comparable to Tetsuo when tested for untapped potential. He recruited elite athletes, children from noble families, and orphans. Some of the boss's comrades reportedly heard Sagami say that he didn't care who it was, someone just needed to make him the savior. The boss gets really stressed out because she can tell that Sagami is going to be a real problem. Outside, Ao and Land of Men recover from the last attack. Ao points out that they are fighting 3 kaiju, and those are just the ones that are here now. It's 1 versus 3, but their only option is to defeat them themselves. The boss once warned Ao about what she called irrational malice, and told her that malice is like rain. It will fall on everyone. You can avoid it or get wet, but you must never change who you are. Ao reminds herself that she's the one who protects them all, and she declares that she will bring down all 3. Land of Men's flames once again lights the sky, and the enemies tell each other to prepare for it to emerge. They are shocked, however, when they realize that it's not coming out. Instead, it's melting the underground ice and creating a side hole. It's flying right at Makoto, and he begins to panic. He doesn't have a way to catch them underground, but he reminds himself that his kaiju is almost healed. It's almost back to normal, so now it can produce tons of smoke. His kaiju's attack is called Labrys, and it produces a special kind of smoke. It covers the entire area, and it makes Ao and Land of Men feel really heavy. We learn that Makoto's kaiju is named Hephaestus. Its skill is manipulating the plumes of smoke it exhales and placing supergravity underneath that smoke. Unfortunately for Makoto, it's not enough to stop Land of Men. Land of Men's flames burst out of the ground, and Makoto can only wonder what's going on. Ao declares that this is 1 enemy down, and she releases more flames. Hephaestus is consumed by the fire, and the others call out to Makoto. In his rage, Tamaya manages to land an attack on Ao, but this only upsets Land of Men. He releases a devastating fire attack and declares that this is 2 enemies down. Eris realizes that this fight has nothing to do with what Ao is doing. They are simply overmatched by the flaming kaiju's incredible damage. He's never seen a kaiju this powerful before, and he says that it's the caliber of a super kaiju. Back with our heroes, we see that they have arrived at the evacuation site. Hagane is reunited with her little brother, and the guys thank Tetsuo. They heard about how he fought for everyone, and everyone is really grateful. A look around shows that everyone is doing their best to get by in this situation. Tetsuo can't help but wonder if it's really okay for him to be here. He failed to win the fight, and he thinks back to how his father said that he was valuable because he can defeat Kaiju. Tetsuo notices that the ice ceiling is pretty thin, and he wonders how he will defend everyone if they get attacked. It turns out that Yukio is thinking about the exact same thing, and he apologizes because they aren't supposed to be fighting the enemy and their condition. Just then they notice some scrap metal and an electric furnace nearby. There is even a giant 3D printer and parts from a Snowman series robot. One of the twins explains that these are designated as materials, and the first tech department chief was the one that built this machine. He said that if you melt the scrap metal, it will come out through the tubes of the 3D printer. No one knows if it works because there hasn't been electricity in this old lab for the longest time. This machine consumes way too much energy, so it's only ever been used once. Hagane can immediately tell that Tetsuo is planning to turn the machine on and fix Yukio so they can return to battle. She is right, but Tetsuo panics when he thinks about what Sagami told him. The twins point out that getting the machine running without electricity will be impossible. Yukio explains that he can hack the system and use what's left of his own energy to power the printer. However, the problem is that doing so would deplete the energy they need for battle. Just then, a guy tells the twins to stop messing around and get to work. He's been pedaling on an emergency generator bike to generate electricity, but no one is helping him. He reminds the twins that there are plenty of generator bikes and he needs their help. The twins smile immediately as they get an idea. We then see the guy pedaling like his life depended on it when he was just about to take a break. The others are helping him as well as they try to generate more electricity to activate the machine. News spreads about what they're trying to do, so even more villagers arrive to help. With Yukio's energy combined with the electricity being generated by all those people, the 3D printer comes back to life. The machine starts printing, and Tetsuo declares that Yukio will be fixed. Tetsuo tells Yukio to keep the new parts to a minimum while also digging through the scrapped parts. Yukio says that it's a great idea and he will handle the design himself. Everyone keeps pedaling, and Tetsuo wonders if this is really going to work. Meanwhile, Takemura celebrates after seeing that Ao has taken down 2 enemies. There is only one left, but it's the very powerful Eris. He knocks Ao out of the sky and declares that this is his chance. They are both on the ground now, and he calls out his Kaiju's name. His Kaiju skill allows it to exchange its flying ability for extremely enhanced physical strength. As a bonus, this also enhances its heat resistance. The Kaiju becomes huge, and it unleashes its first attack. Eris declares that this blow will strike their opponent before they have a chance to react. He already claims victory and says that they're going to make their dream come true. Unfortunately for him, he is stunned when Land of Men begins to do something. He is speechless as a flaming kaiju starts collecting its flames in one spot. It turns out that Land of Men's skill is manipulating a unique heat-based energy. Concentrating it like this increases its firepower continuously. Ao announces that this attack is called the Child of the Sun. The attack seems tiny at first, but the condensed energy implodes inside of Eris's kaiju, and the massive destruction can be seen from miles away. Eris's kaiju was absolutely decimated, and Takemura declares that Ao and Land of Men are the winners. Their celebration doesn't last very long, as the rest of the Vierdi members teleport in front of them. Sagami says that this is checkmate, and Hercules slices off Land of Men's arm. Ao can feel the pain herself, and she screams in agony. Sagami tells Hercules to be careful, because if they carve into the flaming kaiju's heart, they will end its life. Land of Men warns Ao that this kaiju is on a totally different level than the others. He's not giving up though, and he prepares an attack of his own. Land of Men declares that if they're going to win, they will have to strike back immediately. The beast is just too powerful though, and it lands a counterattack in the blink of an eye. Land of Men determines that the odds are against them in close combat. His only option will be to aim for the human and bombard them with his flames. He hopes that they will be able to scare the Kaiju Tamer into retreating on his own. Land of Men unleashes his flames, but Ao is shocked to see that Sagami disappeared. He was teleported into his Kaiju's mouth where the flames can't reach. Sagami doesn't waste even a bit of time as he has Hercules pierce the flaming Kaiju. He points out that their flames are not nearly enough to stop Hercules. Hercules lands a barrage of punches, and Ao can't believe that they saw right through their plan. They saw every one of their attacks coming, and she could only wonder how they're doing it. Land of Men is taking an absolute beating, but he still comes up with an idea. He tells Ao to use Child of the Sun. She has to squeeze the flames out somehow and hit Hercules. Ao refuses and reminds him that they have to be focused to use that attack. Just then she is stunned when Sagami is somehow able to predict her exact words. Sagami says that he won't finish them off just yet because he wants to get revenge for his subordinates. He vows to torment them to within an inch of their life. Hercules lands punch after punch until Land of Men goes flying. Ao has taken severe damage and the others are horrified to see how badly they are getting beaten. Hercules catches Ao and Sagami says that they can't just let her fall. Atoichi teleports and he's delighted to see that everything's going well. They have the flaming kaiju now, so they will be able to infiltrate the Arctic region of Tokyo. They will defeat the humanoid variant that wiped out Earth, and they will be known as the Saviors. Just then Ao calls Sagami a villain, and this triggers a memory. It's from 2031 at Earth Base number 4. Sagami's combat robot pilot qualification assessment came back with a B+ rating, not the elite score he needed. Despite that, he refused to give up on his dream. The children of his Vierde group were excited to see a snowman robot in the sky. They wondered if they would become the saviors if they defeated loads and loads of kaiju. Sagami said that they would, and he told them that they were building their machines right now. He said that their Vierde project was up and running, and they don't have to worry about Tetsuo anymore. Sagami was sure that with these children and the new machines, he would become the new savior. We also see how shocked he was when he was shown the final battle tactical plan. Back to the present, Sagami tells Ao that he actually likes being called a villain. He wonders whether someone who truly has ideals can afford to be picky about their methods. Just then he nearly gets shot in the face, and we see that the others have arrived. The boss missed the target, so she points out that she isn't good with guns. Atoichi teleports Hermes to defend them, and the boss finds that bullets do nothing to them. Hermes rushes in to end their lives, but Tetsuo and Yukio come out of nowhere to rescue them. They crushed Hermes with one blow, so Atoichi is taken out as well. Everyone watches in disbelief, and Takamura declares that they are the real saviors. A look back to just before Tetsuo left the lab shows Yukio wondering if Tetsuo was really ready to fight. He pointed out that their opponent would be Sagami, who said that he wanted Tetsuo to die. Tetsuo revealed that he had come to realize something. Lately, more than ever before, Tetsuo was able to see each person clearly. The only reason he was able to do this was because he opened up his heart and tried to make friends. That's why Tetsuo decided that just because he got hurt once, it doesn't mean that he should close his heart again. If he closed it again, he would probably end up shutting everyone out. He didn't want that, so instead he chose to keep moving forward. Back to the present, Sagami can't believe that Tetsuo really fixed Yukio. He thanks the gods above because they just gave him another chance to end Tetsuo's life. They prepare for battle, and Yukio says that he found a good robot body inside the pile of scrap metal. It was the Snowman series number 16, and its concept is a single unit fortress. Yukio transforms with his new arm, and he calls this the Snowball Rampart. Tetsuo gets very serious as he declares that this will be his first real fight against another human. Yukio strikes a pose and demands for Hercules to release Ao. Tetsuo becomes enraged as he stares at his injured friends. The others are glad to see that the heroes have arrived, but the boss tells them to take a closer look at Yukio. She points out that he's severely damaged, and they're relying on a stopgap measure with a scrap arm slapped onto a broken body. She's frustrated because their only option is to rely on them to fight, even in their condition. She wishes that they could do more, and she calls herself pathetic. Meanwhile, everyone at the evacuation site gets a view of the fight. They realize that they just stuck on a part from a scrap heap onto Yukio, and they wonder if they can really fight like this. Hagane is really worried, so she prays for our heroes to win. Meanwhile, the colonel is really jealous of Yukio. He came back on the scene after fixing up his half-destroyed robot, and he couldn't be more savior-like. Out loud though, he mocks Tetsuo for attaching a right arm made from junk to a broken body. He realizes that having his hands full won't do, so he comes up with an idea. He goes to higher ground and tells Tetsuo that they will fight up here. Yuma tells the colonel that Atoichi has gathered all their injured teammates. Their kaijus died, which caused them to pass out, but they are still alive. Yuma says that she has a gun and she's ready to fight at any time. Sagami doesn't want her to fight because her job will be to watch over Atoichi and the flaming kaiju. He then declares that he's going to end Tetsuo's life. He says that it's a shame because he won't be able to keep Tetsuo's robot. However, he is sure that as long as he has Hercules, at the end of the big freeze, he will come out on top. Just then, he remembers that he can't have the pilot of the flaming kaiju regain consciousness. He decides to crack some of her bones, so he crushes her. Tetsuo charges in rage, so Sagami drops Ao to block his attack. Hercules knocks Yukio away, and the villagers can't believe how strong he is. Tetsuo tells Yukio that he's okay, and he promises to make Sagami apologize to Ao. Sagami's caught off guard as he can sense a pressure coming from our heroes. Tetsuo and Yukio charge in, and Sagami notices that they're using the jet on their right arm to propel themselves forward. Hercules evades them well, but our heroes have a new weapon called the Snowman Tomahawk. They aim for the Kaiju's neck, but it blocks the attack. Our heroes manage to overpower Hercules, and Sagami can't believe that their extra speed made the blow stronger. The Kaiju dodges the next attack, but our heroes anticipated this. The first attack knocked Hercules off balance, so they knew that he would dodge the next one by dodging backwards. They reveal that their tomahawk can extend, and it forces the Kaiju to dodge even further. This gives our heroes the opening that they have been waiting for. They use their jet-propelled punch at the perfect moment, but Hercules still manages to dodge. Sagami realizes that they got lucky. They only dodged that attack because Hercules has 4 legs. Hercules is creating more distance, but Tetsuo won't allow it. He tells Yukio to reel it in, so Yukio calls back his tomahawk. The blade slices off the back of Hercules' head, and Sagami finally understands how powerful this new Yukio is. Yukio takes this moment to admit that they haven't won every kaiju battle that they have ever fought. However, he also says that they have never lost twice. Sagami's shocked to see that they have somehow upgraded their fighting style. He realizes that even if he manages to dodge one attack, the next one will be waiting. If he makes one wrong move, his life will end. Sagami only gets more jealous because Tetsuo is fighting while also creating an amazing battle plan. He has no choice but to accept that this is what a real savior looks like. As Sagami falls apart, Tetsuo and Yukio land another punch. They activate their jet at the very last moment, and it sends Hercules flying. Jaws drop everywhere as the villagers celebrate the pure dominance of the heroes. However, the dust begins to clear, and our heroes are shocked by what they see. Sagami admits that without predation posture and without his supernatural powers, he wouldn't be able to beat Tetsuo. He says that luckily for him, he does have those things, and we see that Hercules has a giant mouth in his midsection. Yukio realizes that they're in trouble, and Sagami vows to end Tetsuo's life. Yukio just barely manages to avoid getting his arm crushed, and our heroes charge back into the fight. This time, when Yukio uses his tomahawk, Hercules is able to catch it out of the air. The villagers are horrified because they can tell that Hercules is going to reel in Yukio. Hercules tries pulling them forward, but Yukio cuts his tomahawk instead. The villagers are amazed when Yukio uses a headbutt, but we see that Hercules is avoiding it. Sagami is impressed by our heroes because they used a multi-hit attack to get a favorable position. He admits that it would be a direct hit, but only for anyone other than him. Yukio unleashes a barrage of punches, but Hercules is able to block every strike. Eventually, he lands a counter, and Tetsuo realizes something. He has been watching Hercules closely, and he is sure that the kaiju somehow knows his movements in advance. It's like Hercules is seeing into the future, and Yukio wonders if that's his supernatural power. Tetsuo determines that if things keep going like this, they will lose on specs. As they take a beating, Tetsuo gives a surprising command to Yukio. He tells him to pull up all the kaiju's logs in front of him. He wants them all played at the same time and at 50% transparency. His plan is to analyze the kaiju's supernatural power while fighting at the same time. Yukio says that this is reckless, but if anyone can do it, it's Tetsuo. Sagami hears him, and Tetsuo's savior-like behavior annoys him even more. He's ready for this fight to end, so he tells Hercules to use predation posture. This reveals how their ability works as we see Sagami inside the mind of Hercules. He stares at shards of possibilities that can happen in the future. There are tons of them, and he analyzes each one carefully. It turns out that the kaiju's ability creates a mirror that shows him the future a few seconds ahead. Since only Sagami's own actions are unconfirmed, the mirror fractures into as many pieces as there are options available to him. This essentially gives him a cheat sheet for the future. Sagami looks at the shards and sees that one option will lead to him getting hit by the axe handle if he dodges left. His best option is to move 1.3 steps forward, so he selects that one. Selecting that shard breaks it into even more shards, allowing him to see what happens next. With this, Sagami's able to decide on what move to make after seeing what kind of impact his actions will have on the future. If there is even the slightest chance of winning, Sagami will keep choosing the right move and will win for sure. Just then, Sagami coughs up a bunch of blood. It turns out that looking more than 10 seconds into the future takes a heavy toll on his body. Sagami refuses to give up, so he tries to go past 10 seconds. He searches every branch of the future looking for a checkmate, but he can't find one. His body is falling apart as he keeps searching, and he refuses to stop. He declares that he will keep looking until he finds the winning move, no matter how many seconds it takes. He absolutely refuses to accept that Tetsuo can't be killed. In Sagami's eyes, Tetsuo has always been the opponent that he must surpass, even at the cost of his own life. He is confident that Tetsuo's only chance of winning is if his brain burns out before he can find the perfect move. Their battle continues, and Tetsuo unleashes another barrage of attacks. Tetsuo tells himself to stay calm and keep analyzing. Some of his attacks are landing for some reason, so he tells himself to take a close look at the Kaiju's movements. Tetsuo is determined to figure out why some punches are getting through when others didn't. Just then, Hercules uses one of Tetsuo's punches as a springboard, and he jumps into the sky. Sagami celebrates because he finally found his winning move. It's 74 seconds into the future, and it's definitely a confirmed victory. Hercules starts firing back, and Tetsuo is overwhelmed. Our heroes crash into the ground, and Sagami announces that only 50 seconds are left. Yukio tries to fight back with an extended punch, but Hercules saw it coming. Sagami declares that everything they're doing is pointless because they're already on the path to death. The villagers are horrified as Hercules moves in to land the final blow. Just then, something comes out of nowhere to stop the attack. Everyone is shocked as they realize that it was Suzu, and they wonder who was controlling it. Unfortunately, the camera was damaged, so now the villagers can't watch the fight. Hagane explains that the Suzu's piloting controls have been switched over to the Mishima Mall console. A look inside reveals that Ao's friends were the ones who took control. They are furious about what Hercules did to Ao, so they vowed to get revenge. The fight continues, and Sagami's disappointed in himself for making an unintended move. The fight is changed, so he needs to take another look at his shards. When he does, he's relieved to see that the future he arrives at is no different. The fight will end with him slicing off Yukio's head. The fight continues, and there's only 10 seconds left. Meanwhile, Tetsuo thinks about how that drone just attacked right now, and Sagami couldn't counter it. He wonders why, and starts to form a hypothesis. Tetsuo thinks that he might know how the Kaiju's power works, but he can't say it out loud, or they will find out. Sagami continues his attack, and he counts down the last 3 seconds. He tells Tetsuo to surrender, and he moves in to slice Yukio's head off. Just then, Yukio is completely stunned as Tetsuo lets go of the controls. Yukio fears what will happen, but Tetsuo is sure that he will know what to do. Sagami confidently goes to end the fight, but he is shocked when Yukio dodges. He's stunned to see that his prediction was wrong, and he wonders what happened. None of it makes any sense because Tetsuo isn't even controlling the robot. Tetsuo then reveals what he realized while analyzing attacks. Out of the hundreds of blows they exchanged, only 2 landed on the Kaiju. Tetsuo was sure that Hercules knew his moves before he even made them. However, those 2 attacks that landed allowed him to narrow down what Hercules couldn't see. Those 2 hits were the drone attack and Yukio's spontaneous attack when they first met. Tetsuo determined that the attacks Hercules can't see are the ones coming from inorganic sources. All he can see are the actions of a living being. This meant that Sagami was paying close attention to the movements Tetsuo was using to control Yukio. Movements his fingers were making on the controls, and the ones his feet were making on the pedals. Once Tetsuo figured this out, he knew what he had to do. Yukio piloting himself was their only way to win the fight. We see that Yukio locked the controls at the perfect moment, and he's now in control. Yukio lands a devastating attack, and Hercules takes critical damage. Sagami can't understand what's going on, but he can tell that Tetsuo is no longer controlling the robot. He tries to anticipate their next move, but it's no use. They get hit again, and Sagami finally realizes that Yukio is piloting himself. Even in this moment, with everything crumbling, all Sagami can think is that he's going to become a savior. He tries one last attack, but Tetsuo retakes control of Yukio and dodges it. Tetsuo thanks Yukio and says that with the damage he inflicted, they will be fine now. It doesn't matter if Sagami can predict his moves anymore because the fight is over. Sagami tells Hercules to move, and he desperately searches the future for any way out. Unfortunately for him, no matter how many branches he checks, there's not a single path out of this. The colonel screams at Tetsuo to die, and Yukio gets really worried. The last time Tetsuo heard these words, he fell apart. Tetsuo tells Yukio that he's fine because this is a wound that he can face head on. Instead of letting this feeling break him, he vows to let Sagami know exactly what it feels like. Tetsuo screams as he releases all his rage, and Sagami screams right back. They charge at each other, and everyone watching goes silent. Tetsuo tells Sagami never to do what he did ever again, and he activates his 30 sword style master attack. It's called Tormenta Azul, and it slices Hercules into pieces. Hercules has just been smashed into pieces, and we see that Sagami's holding on for dear life. Yukio catches him, and Furumaki celebrates their victory. Shinjo tells everyone at the evacuation site the good news, and they celebrate too. They completely lose it, and they thank Yukio and Tetsuo for defending them. They can now go back home, and it's all because of their heroes. Everyone gets emotional, and the boss just hopes that this is all over. What they don't know is that something happens when a kaiju with a master dies. At the same time that it loses consciousness, the death it experiences flows back to the pilot that it had a mental bond with. Things like fear, darkness, intense pain, and loss of all senses. Sagami experiences all this, and he collapses to the ground. During this kind of anguish that would cause any normal person to lose their mind, Sagami continues to stand. He declares that this is not over, and he tells Tetsuo to die over and over again. Tetsuo agrees that this isn't over yet, and he tells Yukio to put him down near Sagami. Yukio doesn't want to because it's too dangerous, so Tetsuo decides to go on his own. Yukio tries to stop him, but Tetsuo explains that this isn't over yet. Yukio wonders where this fearsome determination is coming from, and Tetsuo explains that fight should be ended only when there's no ill will left between the two parties. Yukio is stunned when he realizes that this is a quote from that stupid friend's book that Tetsuo reads. Tetsuo says that if he's done anything horrible enough to earn this much hatred, then he will apologize for it. Also, the colonel has to apologize to Ao and everyone in the mall 1,000 times for what he did. Yukio can't imagine it going well, and he points out that everyone feels differently, so it probably won't be easy. Tetsuo already knows this, but he still wants to try. Meanwhile, Sagami continues to struggle to keep his sanity, and he thinks about his mom and dad. His father was a bureaucrat who, ever since being ousted from his position, had no interest in anything except how many affairs he could have at once. His mother put all her energy into dressing extravagantly and never had any real interest in Sagami. Even when young Sagami was struck by a high fever, so severe that he nearly drowned in his own vomit, neither of his parents came to check on him for 3 days. In a daze, he cleaned up the vomit himself, not wanting anyone else to see it. He reflects about having such a large ego ran in the family. To both of his parents, he was simply less interesting than other women or expensive jewelry. All of this led to Sagami hating himself for being nothing. That's why Sagami, a mediocre man by his own admission, looked up to Tetsuo, the one who saved others and was loved by them, the person they called their savior. Sagami asks himself what he was supposed to do, and he wonders if he should have just given up. He only realized later that giving up is exactly what he should have done. Just like when you see a top athlete on television, you should look away and find happiness in your ordinary daily life. Even knowing this, Sagami wanted to realize his dream no matter what. His flashback then switches to a critical moment in his past. Sagami was furious as he learned that his VRD project was being shelved in favor of Operation Final Battle. An official explained that 20,000 kaiju had formed a massive horde heading towards Earth. Because of the scale of the threat, all Erde branch projects were being shut down. All budget and resources were being allocated to a space battleship for a counterattack and to building the final form of Snowman for Tetsuo. The officials said that if they eliminate all the kaiju in this operation, then it would be a win for humanity. Sagami was devastated, and he began to lose his mind. Everything he was working toward had been dismantled, and now he had to hand the glory to Tetsuo once again. He repeated over and over that he wanted to end Tetsuo's life because he always gets everything. That's when Sagami contacted a woman named Nadare. They knew each other very well, and she told Sagami to rest assured. She promised to let him take the shortest route to becoming a savior. Nadare knew exactly what they had to do, so she said that they would destroy the space battleship. Back to the present, Tetsuo can hear Sagami saying something, but he can't make out what it is. Sagami seems to be in a daze, and it's like he's reliving an experience of some kind. Yukio wonders if his life is flashing before his eyes. It sounds like he's having a conversation with someone, and they can hear some of his words. Tetsuo is stunned when Sagami says the words, "Final battle," and destroy the space battleship. Our heroes are horrified as they begin to piece together what this means. They think back to the battleship they were on and all the innocent people that were with them. Tetsuo vividly remembers the moment it exploded, and he begins to shake. A look back again shows that Sagami was hesitant to go along with the plan. Nadare told him to muster up the courage so he would be able to take the unethical route. She explained to him that since the beginning of time, those who defied convention had been hailed as heroes. She promised to lend him her wisdom so they could accomplish their goals together. We then learned that back when Sagami was a pilot, striving to become a savior, Nadare was a branch researcher. She showed him a path that he never would have found on his own. Since he could never walk the straight and narrow, she offered him the attainable, the unethical path. After she became the brains behind his scheme, his rise through the ranks became amusing beyond belief. The methods she put into motion were blackmail, staged accidents, and even poisoning. Sagami reflects on the exhilaration of running through barriers that should have stopped him in his tracks. However, Sagami hesitated at the idea of destroying the space battleship because the casualties would not just be the crew. He pointed out that if the Kaiju horde reached Earth because the operation failed, then tens of thousands of people would die. Nadare wondered if the sheer number was really the problem, and if it was, then he might as well back down. She suggested that he live a life that was more within his abilities. Sagami realized that he could never turn back because he had already done so much. He had already taken innocent lives, so he told Nadare to proceed with the plan. The plan was to target the branch base inspections. They were being done right before Operation Final Battle by Tetsuo's father, named Kojika. Sagami's job was to buy Nadare some time so she could hack into the central system from a terminal on the space construction base. Then she would upload a virus that would scatter the Air-Day battleship to all corners of the galaxy. Nadare reminded Sagami that once Tetsuo died, Sagami would be recognized and lauded as the true savior. A little later, a fire broke out at the Air-Day Japan branch. Technical Director Kojika was ordered to abort his inspection tour and was granted full protection. Sagami was of course there, and he thought about how he just bought Nadare the time she needed. Nadare reported back to him that the mission was accomplished and the virus had been planted. Then in 2034, the intergalactic cruiser Air-Day and Snowman departed from Earth. Sagami watched and believed that at last he would become the savior. Then September 1st of the same year, the big freeze occurred. The world froze over, and Sagami couldn't believe what he was seeing. People were panicking because communications with every base had gone dark. They said that it was over for both Air-Day and Earth, so all they could do was find a way to survive. Sagami couldn't come to terms with this reality, and he just said that it had to be a lie. Tetsuo and Yukio watch as Sagami relives this moment. He wondered why he could never find a way to become a savior. He began to question if it was really so wrong for him to want to be one. Tetsuo was infuriated to learn that Sagami was the one who destroyed the battleship. The memories of that day still haunt his mind, and Tetsuo loses control. He goes to punch Sagami, but he stops when he sees that he's crying. Sagami then says that he no longer wants to be himself. This reminds Tetsuo of when he said those exact same words just a while ago. Tetsuo desperately wants to be upset, but he just can't push himself to get revenge. His reason is because he sort of understands what Sagami's going through. Tetsuo does his best to hold back his anger, and he wonders if what Sagami really wants is to be a savior. Yukio watches in shock because Tetsuo is trying to communicate even in this terrible situation. Tetsuo demands to know why Sagami wants to be a savior when there's almost nothing good about being one. Yukio's really nervous about Tetsuo having a direct conversation, so he cheers him on. Sagami doesn't understand what Tetsuo means, so Tetsuo explains what being a savior is really like. He points out that as a savior, you can't make any friends and you can't go to school. When you're not in battle, you're almost always training, and since you're fighting all over the world, it throws off your internal clock. Also, the media uses CG, or stand-ins, when you don't look like a savior. Even on social media, people will post all kinds of things about you. Tetsuo goes on about all the downsides to being a savior, and Sagami listens. Yukio is stunned because the two of them are actually having a real conversation. Sagami still can't let go of the idea of becoming a savior, and Tetsuo understands this as well. He says that if Sagami really can't let it go, then he needs to understand something else. He points out that it would be wrong to become a savior by taking human lives instead of the lives of kaiju. He declares that it's a savior's job to defeat the kaiju, and Sagami's stunned. Sagami thinks back to when Tetsuo saved his life, and he breaks down. He has heard enough, and he tells Tetsuo to shut up. He explains that if he had taken the righteous path, he never would have made it. No matter how hard he tried, he would have never been acknowledged. In this world, a mediocre person who simply wants something is never enough. Sagami says that he would do anything to become a savior because he has to become one. He thinks back to his childhood and declares that he has to become a person who's needed. In his mind, this person is a savior. Sagami was sure that he could never become one unless he dragged down those above him. He told himself that he had to eliminate those who refused to recognize him. Tetsuo listens carefully, but he just can't understand this part. However, if Sagami wants it that much, then Tetsuo says that he will give it to him. He tells Sagami to be the savior. Yuki and Sagami are both stunned, and Tetsuo seems hesitant. However, he thinks back to his time as a savior, and he becomes sure of what he said. Sagami's completely thrown off because Tetsuo's offering to let him be the savior. He wonders if Tetsuo is really willing to hand it over, and he isn't even sure if he wants it anymore. Sagami thinks about the fame and glory he would get, and he wonders if there's any other reason to fight. Tetsuo thinks about it, and he realizes that he fights because he can be with Yukio. The other reason is because there's nothing else that he knows how to do. Fighting is all he knows, but then he says that there are more reasons. He thinks back to a time that he saved a family from being attacked by a kaiju. He apologized to Yukio and asked him to hold on a little longer until the people that were saving were out of danger. Yukio told him not to worry, and they managed to rescue all the civilians. Tetsuo now tells Sagami that all he wants is for everyone to be free from suffering. His entire goal is to make the world a calm and gentle place. Of course, he knows that the real world is nothing like that at all. However, if someone ends up not having to fear any kaiju because he and Yukio are fighting, then that brings him some peace. Tetsuo declares that that is why he fights, and he leaves Sagami speechless. Sagami can't help but wonder if these crazy ideals, like a calm and gentle world, make Tetsuo an idiot. He is sure that there's no way it would be possible, but then he thinks about his past. He remembers a time when things seemed peaceful in his life, and he thinks about how nice it would have been if his entire life was like that. In this moment, Sagami realizes that he was actually happy when Tetsuo saved him that one day. He determines that his own life has been pointless, and he could never be a true savior. Just then, Yuma appears out of nowhere, and she declares that she is backup. She wonders if Sagami wants her to shoot Tetsuo, and she reminds him that once they end Tetsuo's life, they will become the true saviors. Sagami calmly interrupts her and says that everything they have done has turned out to be pointless. Sagami's life is completely empty, and he admits to brainwashing all his subordinates. He tells Yuma that if she wants to point her weapon at anybody, she should point it at him. Yuma refuses to believe that Sagami would say this, so she demands to know if Tetsuo is forcing him. Sagami once again blames himself, and he tells Yuma to simply end his life. Yuma begins to cry because she can't understand what's wrong with him. She and the others would never turn on Sagami because he's always been there for them. No matter how scared or close to despair they were, they could always sleep in peace because of Sagami. Yuma calls him their real savior because they wouldn't be alive without him, and she cries in his arms. Sagami is stunned because he never thought about how he actually saved them. He thinks about how right after the big freeze happened, he was left with just a single hope. The world had just frozen over, so Sagami desperately searched for the children that were in his program. He was told that they were in the middle of training when everything froze. Things seemed hopeless because there was one of the giant frozen spheres at the entrance of the training building. Sagami didn't even hesitate for a moment, and he went straight to the building. He crashed into the sphere, and he wouldn't let anything stop him from saving the children. As he made his way to them, he thought about his dream of becoming a savior. Nadare's words about his dreams coming true after Tetsuo's death kept repeating in his head. Sagami damaged his hands as he forced the door of the building open and called out to the children. They were on the verge of losing their lives to the cold, and they were all relieved to see Sagami. Sagami was glad to see that his hope was still there before him. After the children managed to survive thanks to Sagami, they all pitched in to restore the base. Unfortunately, the snowman and the weapons were all frozen and unusable. As for their food and supplies, it was pretty clear that they wouldn't last much longer. As part of their training, they headed towards the mountains, where an Earth supply plane had crashed a few weeks earlier. This was their chance to search for and secure some resources. On their way there, Sagami told the children to speak up if any of them were getting tired. Eventually, the kids became exhausted, so Sagami had no choice but to pull them on a sled on his own. While taking a break inside a cave, one of the children urgently called out to Sagami. Everyone was stunned when they rushed to find that 2 kaiju had been frozen inside a giant block of ice. They seemed to be mid-battle, and Sagami was completely speechless. It became pretty clear to the children that this was a kaiju's nest. They quickly noticed that the kaiju on the left was like the ones they normally see. However, the kaiju with 4 legs on the right was like nothing they had ever seen before. Before they could look any closer, the ground began to shake. 2 more kaiju were fighting above ground, and the kids wondered if they were fighting over territory. Things were getting really dangerous, so Sagami told the kids not to move an inch. Eventually, the battle came to an end, but the kids were horrified to find that they were sealed inside the cave. No matter how hard Sagami tried, he couldn't clear the entrance of all the fallen rubble. Sagami refused to give up as he continued to punch the wall of rocks, and the kids tried to tell him to stop. Sagami kept going because he didn't want the children's lives to come to an end in a place like this. 1 week later, we see that they were still trapped inside the cave. The kids tried to be brave, but they ran out of food a long time ago and they were getting hungry. Sagami assured them that once they got out of the cave, they would be able to have all the food they wanted. He reminded them that he gathered them all himself to become saviors. They were the best of the best, and this little incident wasn't something that they couldn't handle. Yuma explains that Sagami's words were the only things that the kids had to lean on. Unfortunately, several more weeks would pass, and they were still trapped inside the cave. Several of the kids became ill, and they began to wonder if their lives would really end this way. Some of them even began to blame Sagami for choosing them to join Erde. Meanwhile, Sagami was doing his best to break through the ice. Eventually, he managed to make a crack, revealing the kaiju inside of it. This was the only source of food they had access to in quite some time, and they were getting desperate. Sagami reminded himself that the children would have to come first, so he gave the meat to them. He told them that it was their only hope of surviving, and the starving children began to eat. Unfortunately, some of the children got even more sick because of this. They were all confused because they all ate the same meat, but only some of them got sick. They determined that whether someone rejects the kaiju meat or not depends on their body type. Sagami said that he would get some ice for their fever, but he became sick as well. A few days after that, we see that Sagami was in worse shape than anyone. He could only wonder how many more times he would be rejected by the gods. He called himself mediocre at best because he had once again reached his limit. The kids told him not to give up because the ones that were sick before managed to get better. They reminded him that they would all become saviors together and save the world no matter what. They assured him that no matter what the gods said, a savior like him would never pass away in a place like this. Sagami was inspired by their words, and he was sure that the light of salvation resided inside of him. He told the kids that he refused to give up, and he returned that confidence they gave him. Just then, Sagami heard a mysterious voice, and he determined that it came from the 4-legged kaiju. He was in disbelief, and the kaiju came bursting out of the block of ice. This was the first time that Sagami met Hercules. He used his new kaiju to break out of the cave, and the kids were all amazed by his power. A short time after that, we see that many of the others didn't survive and they had to be buried. Sagami never gave up on giving the others hope to continue surviving, and that's what made him their savior. Back in the present, Yuma tells Sagami that there's no way that he brainwashed them. She says that his life isn't pointless either, and she begs him to stop saying that. Sagami thinks back to when he was raising them as kids. Like always, they couldn't sleep without him by their side, and Sagami did his best to make them feel safe. Tetsuo has no idea what to say, and Yukio can tell that he's flustered. They have defeated all the enemy kaiju, so this means that their mission is complete. Just then, the lower half of Hercules begins to move, but that shouldn't be possible, because it was definitely dead just a minute ago. It attacks Yukio, and Yukio tells everyone to run away. Not even Sagami can understand what's going on, and he wonders who is controlling Hercules because it's not him. Nearby, a mysterious woman appears, and she calls Tetsuo a loathsome human. She wonders if she should devour him or simply end his life. She descends from Hercules, and Tetsuo wonders if this person is one of their enemies. Yuma realizes that she is Raiko, which is confusing because Raiko was just defeated. Raiko says that she's very lucky because not only did she find the human's nest, but she found Tetsuo as well. Sagami's more confused than anyone because Raiko isn't talking like herself at all. Raiko's face begins to fall apart, making it very clear that it isn't Raiko. As she falls apart, Tetsuo realizes something. Each time Raiko's skin disintegrates, she emits an even more powerful and ominous presence. Even though she looks like a normal human, she is most definitely some kind of kaiju. Tetsuo determines that the others are too close to her, so he has to find a way to get them to safety. Unfortunately, there's no way for him to know the enemy's speed or attack range. His only hope will be to board Yukio, so he calls out to him. Yukio makes his way back, but Hercules stops him. Yukio can't believe how strong it is, and Raiko reveals that she's controlling Hercules. She says that it was only about a week ago when she was in Tokyo. She saw that there were still some humans that she failed to capture, and it was Sagami and his crew. Sagami is horrified as he begins to piece together what's going on. When they were in Tokyo, they encountered the humanoid variant. A look back shows when Sagami and the others were running away from the three-headed kaiju. They were just about to get away, but something happened. Raiko was captured as time seemed to stop, and no one else noticed. The real Raiko was devoured by the humanoid variant, and she was replaced by a fake. Raiko explains that this is how she was able to infiltrate their group. Doing this allowed her to find the base where the early survivors were living and hiding. She also learned about their powers, the mall, and the fact that Tetsuo had survived. Raiko thanks Sagami because he was very convenient for her purposes. She even says that this has been true for the past 10 years. Sagami is horrified as it begins to sink in that this Raiko is an avatar of the humanoid variant. What's even more incomprehensible is that it seems to have known him for the past 10 years. Sagami wonders what she meant by this, and he can't understand what he's seeing now that Raiko's face has completely fallen apart. He is more confused than ever because she looks exactly like Nadare. Tetsuo realizes that this must be the Nadare from Sagami's story, the woman who pushed for the destruction of Erde and actually carried it out. Raiko reveals that this is because even her Nadare form is just another avatar. She has been using it for over 20 years, and she can see that Sagami really believed her. He really thought that she was going to turn him into a savior. She calls him a fool and reveals that it was all part of her plan. The failure of the final battle, the earth freezing, and even the evolution of the kaiju were all part of her plan. The avatar reveals its true form and declares that its plan will soon be completed. All it has left to do is crush the humans' final rebellion. As a reward for Sagami's tenacity, the avatar says that it will neither devour him or use him. Instead, it will simply take his life. The avatar prepares a lethal attack, and Sagami's ready for his life to end. Tetsuo acts immediately to change the direction of its attack, and the avatar knocks him away. Sagami can't believe that Tetsuo saved his life, and the avatar is caught off guard as well. Tetsuo points out that he's still alive when his life should have ended in the final battle. The avatar's plan has already failed once, so Tetsuo is determined to make it fail again. Tetsuo knows that if the avatar targets him instead, then the others will be able to escape. The avatar tells Tetsuo the savior that he will neither devour him or use him either. His life must end as well, so the avatar prepares another attack. Tetsuo declares that it can't end his life, and he calls on Yukio. Yukio blocks the attack, and the variant wonders where the kaiju he was controlling went. The avatar is stunned when it sees that the kaiju's front legs were cut off. Yukio admits that the avatar is very powerful, but it's just using the same tricks over and over again. Yukio apologizes for being late, and he puts Tetsuo back in control. The avatar mounts Hercules' bottom half and mutates it into a whole nother kaiju. The avatar calls this version Nauticles and declares that they will end everyone's lives. This fused beast unleashes a terrifying attack, and Yukio is stunned to see how much power it has. Nauticles says that they won't survive a direct hit, and she shows that she can change the attack's direction in midair. As our heroes dodge, Tetsuo realizes that he has to create an opening so he can get closer to the beast. Nauticles laughs like a maniac, but she is caught off guard when Sagami appears behind her. Sagami declares that he will send her to the underworld, and he fires a shot at the back of her head. Yukio and Tetsuo finally manage to evade the attack, so they go charging in. Nadocles is still alive, and she once again calls Sagami a fool. She prepares another attack, and Sagami already knows what's coming. He agrees that he's been a fool from the start, and Nadocles fires her attack. She tells Sagami to get out of her way, and she slices him in half. Tetsuo is furious to see this, so he angrily tells Yukio to use their Seven Sword style attack. In this split moment, Nadocles says that it's pointless to destroy her because she is just an avatar. Tetsuo and Yukio's blade cuts her into pieces, but she has one final message. Before her life comes to an end, she declares that Earth already belongs to the Kaiju. After she is eliminated, Tetsuo goes to see Sagami. Yuma explains that he's still alive because the Kaiju pilot's body is strong because it's closer to a Kaiju's. Unfortunately, the damage is far too severe and Sagami can't be saved. Sagami can only apologize, and he has one last request for the true savior. He pleads for Tetsuo to save Earth and to protect his children. Yuma sobs uncontrollably after hearing Sagami's last wish, and his life comes to an end. Tetsuo and Yukio return to the mall, feeling terrible, but everyone is happy to see them. All the villagers welcome them home and thank them for saving everyone. The mall is in bad shape, and there are kaiju corpses everywhere. The villagers say that they will make the best of it, as they plan to eat all the kaiju meat for several months. Hagane can hardly contain her emotions, and she explains that Ao and Land of Men will both be okay. Everyone in the mall managed to survive, and it's all because of Tetsuo and Yukio. Hagane thanks them over and over again, and Tetsuo couldn't be more relieved to hear that everyone is okay. The entire ordeal is finally over, and we see our hero again the next day. For some reason, when he wakes up, his face feels really tingly. Hagane notices that his ears are red and swollen, so she fears that it's frostbite. Tetsuo says that he feels okay, but there's no way that can be true. Hagane takes him to see the boss of the mall because she used to be a high-ranking army surgeon, and she's an amazing doctor. Tetsuo remembers overhearing how rude the boss was, so he doesn't look forward to meeting her. To make things even worse, Tetsuo has never liked doctors. In Tetsuo's eyes, doctors were the ones who examined his body in elaborate machines post-battle. Also, before the final battle, doctors were the ones who embedded chips inside his face. Worst of all, whenever he tries to explain his condition to them, he has never once managed to do it correctly. Tetsuo tells Hagane that he doesn't need to be examined, but she points out that everyone is worried about him. Tetsuo is caught off guard by her kindness, so he promises to do his best. Just then, they run into Furamaki, and they notice that he's carrying a huge chunk of meat. Furamaki explains that Ao is in a room nearby, and he says that they should visit her. They do just that, and Ao's delighted to see them. She explains that by the time she woke up, the entire battle was already over. Tetsuo can tell that she's badly wounded, but she's still in good spirits. He can't help but notice that Ao is eating her fill of food, and Ishida points out that it's kaiju meat. Since Ao is a kaiju tamer, the more she eats, the sooner she will recover. Ao says that unless she and Land of Men get better, they won't be able to produce heat for them all. Land of Men is doing his best to get better as well by eating tons of meat. Ishida's really busy making amazing food from the different kaiju that they fought in battle. Tetsuo is caught off guard because they were just fighting these beasts the day before. He determines that this is simply survival of the fittest. Just then Ao lets it slip out that she thinks that she is a disgrace. Everyone is surprised, and she can't believe that she just blurted out her insecurities. Ao explains that she was acting like the mall's savior, but she ended up losing. In the end, it was the real savior who protected the mall. This really burns her up inside, and she wonders if she can even say thank you to Tetsuo. Hagane thinks that they should pretend like they didn't hear that, but Tetsuo isn't on the same page. He simply tells Ao that she's not a disgrace, and she hasn't been one a single time. Hagane agrees with him, but Ao says that she failed miserably during the battle. Tetsuo is stunned, as he points out that if it wasn't for her, then he and Yukio wouldn't have made it back in time. On top of that, Hagane points out that Ao defeated 4 kaiju before Tetsuo even got there. Ao gets emotional as she thanks them, and she apologizes for being such a mess. She just wanted someone to cheer her up, so now she feels much better. She promises to get well soon and become even stronger. Ao never wants to get hurt like this again, and she wonders if Tetsuo's ears are okay. Tetsuo interrupts her to apologize for not reaching her sooner. He hated seeing her get injured, so he promises to protect her for sure next time. Ao can't believe that she's one of the people he wants to protect because she's a kaiju tamer, and she thanks him. Ashita can tell that Ao is getting flustered, so she breaks up their little moment. She tells our hero exactly where the boss is and says that they should get going. On their way to see the boss, Tetsuo runs into Yukio. Yukio notices that his face is all messed up, and he tells Tetsuo that he should be more worried. Yukio explains that the boss was just here, but she's already gone. He reveals that the enemy prisoners are actually inside this small shed. Yukio has been ordered to stand guard over them, and we get a look into the past. The prisoners wondered if it was really a good idea to use this rundown shack as a prison. They pointed out that there are pilots, so they could destroy the entire place if they really wanted to. The boss was sure that they could, but she explained that they don't have a cage that could hold freaks of nature like them. She warned that if there were any signs of them trying to escape, they would just demolish them entirely. Yukio was especially surprised when she said that he would be the one that would eliminate them. The prisoners were sure that the Savior's machine would never do such a thing, but the boss wasn't done. She assured them that Yukio was a heartless warrior. She said that Yukio told her that their blood would stick to his fist the best, and the prisoners were terrified. Yukio is now conflicted because he can't believe how terrified Makoto was of him. Hagane explains that the boss will do whatever it takes to make sure that the mall is safe. Yukio then reveals that after interrogating the prisoners, the boss went to the warehouse. Our heroes go there next, but they are told that the boss went to the kitchen. The kitchen says that she went to the field, and the field says that she went to the cemetery. When they get to the cemetery, Tetsuo is amazed by what he sees. Hagane explains that the land of men dug out a giant chunk of ice for them, and they put the names of everyone who passed away in the mall. The names are engraved in the ice, and this acts as a memorial. After a moment of silence, the boss arrives to see them paying their respects. She immediately notices that Tetsuo has minor frostbite and declares that they will head to the clinic. She gets him all fixed up, and she wonders if he has any other wounds. Tetsuo says that he doesn't, so she reminds him that he will regret it if he's hiding something. This warning makes Tetsuo reveal that he has an injury on his midsection. The boss sees how beat up he is, so she wonders if the humanoid variant was really that strong. Tetsuo explains that the avatar itself wasn't anything he couldn't handle, but there was something else. The presence he sensed for a split second coming out of the avatar was like nothing he had ever felt before. It was the main body's presence, and it was the most sinister feeling that he has ever encountered. The boss makes her final decision, and she surprises Tetsuo when she reveals that they will be moving away from Mishima Mall. The humanoid variant from Tokyo could attack them at any time, so they will leave as soon as Land of Men has recovered. They have managed to stay hidden here for a while, but the time has come for them to leave. In order to survive, they will have to look for a base to the west. The boss takes a moment to thank Tetsuo for protecting everyone, and he says that it was no problem. Later that night, the entire village has a celebration. Everyone has a good time getting drunk and eating kaiju meat. Some of the villagers notice that Tetsuo isn't eating any meat, and they wonder if something is wrong. Tetsuo explains that he doesn't know if it's safe for him to eat kaiju meat, so he's avoiding it. Tetsuo is eating canned tuna instead, so Takamura reveals that he got him some fish guts. The villagers point out that it's a pretty big deal, and Takamura explains that it's a thank you for everything Tetsuo has done. Everyone else wants to thank him as well, so they all give him presents. Takamura combines them all into an amazing dish, so Tetsuo digs in. Tetsuo says that it's delicious, and everyone has a good time at the party. Even the prisoners are surprised when they are served the meat of their kaiju, and even more shocked when Yuma starts eating. Tetsuo takes in the moment, and he looks one last time at his book about making friends. After a while, we see that Tetsuo has gotten drunk as he leaves the party. He goes to see Yukio, who notices that his spirits are really high. Yukio couldn't be happier to see that Tetsuo is starting to fit in with the other people. Tetsuo says that it makes him really happy too, so Yukio can only wonder what he's doing outside. He says that Tetsuo should head back with the others, but Tetsuo explains that he would rather be here. Yukio is surprised to hear this, and Tetsuo falls asleep. Thanks for watching my recap of the first season of this anime. Make sure to like the video.